poor single dad fainted from hunger at bus stop. The teen who helped him was a self-made millionaire. He hit the ground starving, clutching a worn photo of his kids. But when a stranger knelt beside him with food and a phone call that would change his life, no one guessed the boy saving him owned half the town and was about to lose everything himself. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The harsh glow of the kitchen's lone light bulb cast shadows across Ethan Cole's tired face as he moved quietly through the pre-dawn darkness. His worn slippers made soft shuffling sounds against the linoleum floor, a floor that, like everything else in the small rental house, had seen better days. The kitchen clock read 5:45 a.m. Ethan's stomach twisted with familiar emptiness as he opened the cupboard door, its slight creak echoing in the quiet morning. His heart sank at the sight. Just 3 slices of bread remained on the shelf, their edges already starting to turn stale. The rest of the cupboard stood bare, except for a half-empty container of salt and some dried pasta he was saving for dinner. He glanced toward the children's bedroom where Emma and Luke slept peacefully, their soft breathing just audible through the thin walls. The sound steadied him, as it always did. They were his anchor, his reason for pushing forward each day, even when everything else felt like it was slipping away. Ethan pulled out the bread and dropped the slices into their ancient toaster, the metal sides dented but still functioning. While the bread toasted, he checked his reflection in the kitchen window. Dark circles rimmed his eyes, telling the story of another restless night spent worrying about bills and job applications. The toast popped up, and he arranged the slices on their 2 remaining uncracked plates. His stomach growled loudly, protesting the sight of food he wouldn't eat. Ethan ignored it, just as he had been doing for days now. The children needed the food more than he did. "Daddy." Emma's voice came from the doorway, making him turn. She stood there in her faded pink pajamas, her long brown hair tousled from sleep. Luke appeared behind her, rubbing his eyes with tiny fists. "Hey, sweetheart," Ethan said, forcing brightness into his voice. "You're up early." "I heard the toaster," Emma said, climbing onto her usual chair at the kitchen table. Luke followed, still half asleep but brightening at the sight of breakfast. Ethan set the plates before them, then busied himself at the sink to hide his own hunger. "Eat up, kids. You need your strength for school today." Luke took a big bite of toast. "Aren't you having any, Daddy?" "Oh, I already ate while you were sleeping," Ethan lied, the words tasting bitter in his mouth. He hated being dishonest with his children, but the alternative, watching their faces fall as they realized how little food remained, would be worse. Emma's sharp eyes studied him as she ate her toast slowly, making it last. Sometimes Ethan thought his daughter could see right through him, understanding more than any 8-year-old should have to understand. She'd been that way since losing her mother, more observant, more careful with her words. While the children ate, Ethan's mind wandered to the factory where he'd worked for 12 years. He could still feel the weight of the machinery he'd operated, still hear the rhythmic hum of the assembly line. Then came the accident, a moment's loss of concentration, a slip, and suddenly he couldn't lift his right arm above his shoulder without sharp pain shooting down his back. The medical bills had eaten through their savings first. Then the missed mortgage payments forced them to sell the house. Now, in this small rental with its drafty windows and temperamental heating, they were down to their last dollars. Ethan opened his old briefcase on the counter, checking again that his resume was inside. The paper was crisp. He'd spent precious printer credits at the library making fresh copies. His hand brushed against the small photo he kept in the side pocket, him and Sarah on their wedding day, both laughing at something now forgotten. He quickly closed the briefcase before the grief could surface. "Time to get ready for school," he announced, helping Luke down from his chair. "Miss Patterson will pick you up in an hour." "But what about you, Daddy?" Luke asked, clinging to Ethan's leg. "Where are you going?" Ethan knelt down, ignoring the twinge in his back. "I've got a job interview today, buddy, a really important one." "At the new factory?" Emma asked, carrying her plate to the sink. She had to stretch to reach the faucet. "That's right," Ethan nodded. "If it goes well, things will get better soon." He helped them both get dressed, making sure their clothes were clean and as unwrinkled as possible. The morning routine was familiar, checking homework folders, tying shoelaces, combing hair. Finally, with the children ready, Ethan returned to his room to dress himself. He pulled on his best shirt, worn at the cuffs but still presentable after careful ironing. His tie, one of only 2 he owned, had a small stain near the bottom that he tucked carefully into his jacket. When he emerged, Emma was waiting by the front door. She wrapped her arms around his waist, squeezing tight. "We'll be okay, Daddy," she whispered, her face pressed against his stomach. Ethan's throat tightened as he hugged her back. Her faith in him was both a blessing and a burden, a reminder of everything he had to fight for and everything he stood to lose. "I know we will, sweetheart," he managed, forcing a smile as he stepped back. Luke ran up for his own hug, and Ethan held them both close for a moment, drawing strength from their warmth and trust. Then he straightened up, grabbed his briefcase, and opened the front door. The morning air hit him like a slap, bitter cold seeping through his thin jacket. His stomach cramped again, reminding him of its emptiness. But he squared his shoulders and stepped out into the gray dawn. The late morning sun hung pale and distant in the Tennessee sky, offering little more than the illusion of warmth as Ethan trudged along the cracked sidewalk. Each step felt heavier than the last. His dress shoes, once polished to a mirror shine, but now worn thin at the soles from months of pavement pounding, scraping against the uneven concrete with a weary shuffle. The October wind whipped mercilessly through the narrow streets of their small town, cutting through his thin jacket like icy fingers, searching for every gap in the worn fabric. He'd been walking for nearly an hour now, his breath forming small clouds in the crisp air. The bus stop was still another mile away, maybe more, but his old Honda sat useless in their driveway, its gas tank as empty as their kitchen cupboards. He'd sold his truck months ago to pay the electric bill, and now even putting $5 of gas in the car felt like an impossible luxury. The memory of Emma's worried face as he'd left the house made his chest tighten with a familiar ache. She was only 8, too young to carry such heavy concerns on her small shoulders, yet she seemed to understand more than he ever wished she did. Her wide brown eyes, so much like Sarah's, had followed him to the door, full of questions she was too thoughtful to ask. Ethan's stomach cramped sharply, a vicious reminder of the meals he'd skipped over the past 3 days. He pressed his hand against his midsection, trying to quiet the gnawing emptiness that had become his constant companion. The kids had eaten the last of the cereal that morning, and Luke had asked for seconds. Ethan had smiled and told him they were saving room for a big lunch, watching his 4-year-old son's face light up with anticipation that broke his heart. The job interview papers in his battered briefcase felt like lead weights against his hip, but they represented his last real hope. The manufacturing plant on the edge of town, the same one where he'd worked for 12 years before the accident, was hiring again. If he could just make it through the interview, if they could look past his medical leave and see the man he used to be. The wind picked up suddenly, sending a flurry of golden and crimson leaves skittering across his path like tiny dancers. Ethan pulled his jacket tighter around his thin frame, though the gesture felt futile. The navy blue fabric had worn threadbare at the elbows, and one of the brass buttons was hanging by a single determined thread. It was the same jacket Sarah had given him for their 5th wedding anniversary, back when they'd had family dinners around a full table and movie nights with popcorn, when their biggest worry had been what to pack for the kids' school lunches, and whether Emma needed new shoes for the fall. His vision blurred slightly at the edges, and he blinked hard to clear it, shaking his head with determination. "Just fatigue," he told himself firmly. "Just need to keep moving." Just a little further to the bus stop, then 30 minutes on the bus. Then he'd have his chance to convince them he was still the reliable supervisor they'd once trusted. The morning traffic hummed steadily past him, a river of cars carrying people to their jobs, their meetings, their normal Tuesday routines. Soccer moms in SUVs, businessmen checking their phones at red lights, delivery trucks rumbling toward their destinations. Ethan kept his eyes fixed straight ahead, trying not to think about how many of those vehicles belonged to people he used to work alongside at the factory before the forklift accident that crushed his leg and his dreams in one terrible moment, before the medical bills started piling up like autumn leaves, before everything changed. A familiar blue pickup truck slowed as it passed, and Ethan's heart clenched as he recognized Carl Jenkins behind the wheel. His old foreman, a good man with calloused hands and a fair heart. For a moment, their eyes met through the windshield. Carl's expression shifted from casual recognition to something that looked like pity mixed with guilt. Ethan forced himself to nod and wave, mustering what he hoped was a confident smile. Carl returned the gesture awkwardly before accelerating away, probably heading to the same factory where Ethan hoped to work again. Finally, mercifully, the bus stop came into view. The metal bench gleamed dully under the autumn sun, its green paint chipped and faded from years of weather and waiting. A few other people had already gathered there, early shift workers heading home, an elderly woman with a cane, a teenager with a backpack slung over one shoulder. Ethan's legs felt like rubber bands stretched to their breaking point, and his chest had begun to ache with a deep, persistent throb that made each breath feel like work. The metallic taste in his mouth was getting stronger. Still, He forced himself to stand straight as he approached the small group, squaring his shoulders with what remained of his pride. Dignity was about all he had left these days. An elderly woman sat primly on one end of the bench, her silver hair neatly pinned back in an old-fashioned style, a cheerful floral print shopping bag resting at her sensible black shoes. She looked up as Ethan approached, her kind face immediately creasing with grandmother's concern. Her blue eyes, magnified slightly behind wire-rimmed glasses, took in his pale complexion and unsteady gait with the practiced assessment of someone who'd raised children and worried over grandchildren. "Oh dear, you look quite pale," she said gently, her voice carrying the soft drawl of someone born and raised in these Tennessee hills. She was already starting to slide over on the bench, patting the green metal beside her with a weathered hand. "Please, take a seat right here. You look like you could use a rest." Ethan managed what he hoped was a reassuring smile, shaking his head with as much conviction as he could muster. His voice came out slightly breathless, barely more than a whisper carried away by the wind. "I'm fine, ma'am. Thank you kindly. Please, keep your seat." The words felt thick on his tongue, and he gripped his briefcase tighter with both hands, trying to steady himself against the growing dizziness that was making the world tilt at strange angles. The woman's concerned frown deepened. "Son, I've seen that look before. My late husband used to get that same gray color when his blood sugar dropped. You sure you don't want it?" The world suddenly tilted sideways, like a carnival ride spinning out of control. The sounds of traffic became distant and muffled, as if someone had stuffed cotton deep in his ears and wrapped his head in thick blankets. He could hear the elderly woman saying something urgent, her voice far away and distorted like an old radio with poor reception. His briefcase slipped from his nerveless fingers, the worn leather handle sliding through his grasp as if it were made of ice. The papers inside scattered across the sidewalk, his resume, his references, his hope, dancing away on the autumn wind like white butterflies. The concrete rushed up to meet him with startling speed. He was dimly aware of his knees hitting the rough pavement first, the impact sending a jolt of pain through his weakened body. Then his shoulder struck the ground, and he rolled slightly onto his side, his cheek pressed against the cold sidewalk that still held the morning's frost in its shadowed cracks. Above him, the pale October sky swirled in a dizzy dance of gray and blue, clouds spinning like a child's pinwheel. Through the growing haze that was closing in around the edges of his consciousness, he saw a pair of pristine white sneakers running toward him across the pavement, their laces bright and new, their soles barely scuffed. A young voice cut through the fog like a lighthouse beam, clear and concerned and surprisingly mature. Sir, are you okay? Can you hear me?" Strong, young hands touched his shoulder with surprising gentleness. The last thing Ethan heard before the darkness claimed him was that same voice, calling out with authority beyond its years. "Someone call 911 and get him some water." Then everything went black, and Ethan Cole collapsed into unconsciousness on a small-town sidewalk, unaware that his life was about to change forever. Ethan's eyes fluttered open to a world that slowly came into focus, like adjusting the lens on an old camera until the blurred edges sharpened into clarity. The first thing he noticed was something soft cushioning his head. A jacket, he realized, neatly folded beneath him like a makeshift pillow. The fabric smelled faintly of clean laundry and something else, maybe cedar or pine. He was still at the bus stop, lying across the cold metal bench, but now someone had positioned him carefully, thoughtfully, with his legs elevated slightly on his worn duffel bag. "Hey there," a gentle voice said from somewhere above him. "Take it easy, sir. You gave everyone quite a scare." Ethan blinked slowly, his vision clearing like fog lifting from a morning field. The world came into focus to reveal a young man, no, a boy, really, crouching beside the bench with genuine concern etched across his features. He looked about 17, maybe 18 at most, with neat brown hair that caught the weak November sunlight and kind eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled. There was something uncommon about those eyes, a depth that seemed to hold understanding far beyond his years. The teenager wore simple clothes, well-fitted jeans without tears or designer labels, and a plain blue sweater that looked warm but not expensive. A well-worn canvas backpack sat beside him on the concrete, the kind a student might carry to college classes. Everything about him spoke of someone who dressed for comfort rather than show. "Here," the teen said, his voice carrying a warmth that reminded Ethan of his late wife's gentle tone. He held out a wrap sandwich, turkey and Swiss from the looks of it, alongside a bottle of spring water, still cool from the store. "You should eat something. Your blood sugar's probably pretty low. Ethan tried to sit up, moving slowly as the world tilted slightly before settling back into place. His cheeks burned with the familiar heat of shame, that old companion that had been his constant shadow these past months. The bench's metal edge pressed into his back as he struggled to find his dignity among the scattered pieces of his pride. "I'm fine, really," he managed, his voice hoarser than he'd expected. "I just got a little dizzy from standing up too fast. Sometimes that happens when—" "Sir," the boy cut in gently, but there was a quiet firmness in his tone that reminded Ethan of his own father, the kind of authority that came from caring, not commanding. "You fainted. Completely out for about 15 minutes. Please take these." He gestured toward the food with a slight nod. "I got them from Martin's Deli across the street while you were unconscious, fresh made this morning." The smell of fresh bread and sliced turkey hit Ethan's empty stomach like a physical blow, making it clench and growl audibly. His mouth watered involuntarily, and he had to swallow hard to keep from grabbing the sandwich immediately. His hands trembled slightly, whether from hunger, embarrassment, or the lingering effects of fainting. He couldn't tell. Ethan's voice caught in his throat. He cleared it and tried again. "I can't pay you back right now. Maybe in a few days when I'm Tyler Brooks," the teen said instead of acknowledging Ethan's concern about payment. He settled onto the bench beside him, careful to keep a respectful distance while still remaining close enough to help if needed. "And there's nothing to pay back. This isn't a loan or charity. It's just one person helping another. Please, just eat. You'll feel better." Something in Tyler's voice, a warmth without pity, understanding without condescension, made the tight knot in Ethan's chest loosen just a fraction. The boy spoke like someone who understood what it meant to go without, not like someone looking down from a place of privilege. There was no trace of judgment in his expression, no uncomfortable squirming that Ethan had grown accustomed to seeing in others' faces when his situation became apparent. Ethan's resolve crumbled. He unwrapped the sandwich carefully, his fingers working slowly as if the simple act of accepting food from a stranger required all his concentration. The paper crinkled softly in the quiet morning air. He tried not to look too eager, despite the gnawing hunger that had become his constant companion. Tried to maintain some shred of dignity, even as his body betrayed his desperation. The first bite was heaven. Real turkey, not the processed kind, with crisp lettuce and ripe tomato on what tasted like freshly baked sourdough. He had to pause and close his eyes for a moment, overwhelmed by the simple pleasure of actual food after 2 days of nothing but tap water and the occasional saltine cracker he'd found in the back of a kitchen cabinet. "Ethan Cole," he managed between careful bites, remembering the manners his mother had drilled into him decades ago. Even in his lowest moments, politeness felt like armor, a way to hold on to who he used to be. "Thank you for this." "And for?" He gestured vaguely with his free hand toward the jacket that had cushioned his head. "The jacket's mine," Tyler said with an easy smile that transformed his entire face. "Though Mrs. Henderson over there insisted on staying until you woke up, she was pretty worried about you." Tyler nodded toward an elderly woman in a powder blue coat waiting near the bus stop sign. She had silver hair pinned back in a neat bun and carried a large purse along with 2 canvas shopping bags. When she noticed them looking her way, she gave a friendly wave and called out, "You take care now, honey," before gathering her belongings to board the city bus that had just pulled up with a wheeze of air brakes. The kindness of strangers. When had Ethan stopped believing in it? When had he started expecting the worst from everyone he met? Watching Mrs. Henderson climb aboard the bus, he felt something inside him, something that had been frozen solid for months, begin to thaw just slightly. Ethan ate slowly, savoring each bite not just for the nourishment, but for the reminder that good still existed in the world. Tyler chatted easily about the unseasonably cold weather, about how the leaves were changing later this year than usual, about nothing and everything. His casual conversation helped ease the awkwardness of the situation, giving Ethan space to eat without feeling like he was being watched or pitied. "How long was I out?" Ethan asked suddenly, the sandwich halfway to his mouth as alarm shot through him. "The interview." God, please don't let him have missed the interview. "Only about 15 minutes, Tyler assured him quickly, seeming to understand his panic. "Mrs. Henderson called me over when you started swaying on your feet. Lucky thing too, managed to catch you before you hit your head on the bench or the concrete." Relief flooded through Ethan so powerfully that his hand shook slightly. He took a long drink from the water bottle, feeling his body begin to respond to the hydration and food. His mind was already starting to clear, the fog of hunger and exhaustion lifting like morning mist. "I appreciate your help, Tyler. More than you know," Ethan said, his voice thick with genuine gratitude. "Things have been—" He trailed off, unsure how to explain his situation to this kind stranger without sounding like he was asking for more help. How did you tell someone that you'd lost everything? That you'd gone from being a respected supervisor to a man who couldn't afford to feed himself? Rough lately? Tyler supplied quietly, his tone free of the curiosity that usually accompanied such questions. There was understanding in his dark eyes that seemed far beyond his teenage years, as if he'd seen his own share of hardship. Yeah, I get that. My mom and I had some pretty tough times when I was younger, years where we weren't sure how we'd make rent or keep the lights on. Something in Tyler's tone, genuine empathy rather than polite sympathy, made Ethan's carefully maintained emotional walls crack just a bit. Here was someone who might actually understand what it felt like to choose between necessities, to lie awake at night, calculating and recalculating bills that would never add up to something manageable. Haven't eaten in 2 days, Ethan admitted softly, the words coming out in barely more than a whisper. He stared at his hands, noting how the wedding ring he still wore had gotten loose on his finger. Got an interview today at Marshall Manufacturing. Had to choose between bus fare and food for my kids' lunchboxes. He paused, swallowing hard. Kids come first. Always. Every single time, Tyler agreed without hesitation, his voice carrying the conviction of someone who truly understood that priority. No question about it. The simple validation meant more to Ethan than Tyler could possibly know. For months, he'd questioned every decision, second-guessed every choice, wondered if he was failing his children in ways he couldn't even see. To hear someone else confirm that he'd made the right call, that his children's needs should come before his own, felt like absolution. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment while Ethan finished the last of his sandwich. The morning rush had passed, leaving the bus stop mostly empty, except for the occasional pedestrian hurrying past with their head down against the cold wind. The weak November sun struggled through the clouds, casting everything in a pale, washed-out light that matched Ethan's mood. Tyler checked his watch, a simple digital model with a black band, Ethan noticed. Nothing flashy or expensive, just functional. Even his accessories seemed chosen for practicality rather than show. "What time is your interview?" Tyler asked, his tone casual but attentive. 11:30, Ethan replied, anxiety creeping back into his voice despite the temporary relief the food had provided. He'd been planning to arrive at least 20 minutes early, hoping that punctuality might compensate for his worn clothes and desperate situation. First impressions mattered so much when you had little else to offer. "Perfect," Tyler said, standing up and shouldering his backpack with an easy motion. "I can give you a ride. My car's just around the corner." Ethan shook his head quickly, almost instinctively. "No, I couldn't impose like that. You've already done so much." "Consider it a friend helping another friend," Tyler said firmly. But his tone remained warm rather than pushy. He picked up his jacket and offered Ethan a hand up from the bench. "Besides, it's on my way to where I need to be anyway." Ethan hesitated, staring at the offered hand. His pride, what little remained of it, whispered that he should refuse, that he'd accepted enough charity for one day, that he was already dangerously close to becoming the kind of person he'd once pitied. But there was something about Tyler's straightforward kindness that made it feel less like charity and more like genuine human connection, like friendship. "You're absolutely sure it's no trouble?" Ethan asked, still uncertain, his voice betraying the internal battle between desperation and dignity. "Absolutely positive," Tyler replied with that same warm smile that seemed to light up his entire face. "What are friends for?" The word friends hung in the air between them, and Ethan realized with a start that he couldn't remember the last time someone had called him that. When had he stopped having friends? When had his world shrunk down to just him and his children, isolated by circumstances and shame? He reached out and grasped Tyler's offered hand, letting the young man help pull him to his feet. The sleek silver car pulled up to the curb outside Wilson Manufacturing, its modern appearance a stark contrast to the weathered brick building. Ethan gripped his worn briefcase tightly, his knuckles white with nervous energy. The morning sun glinted off the factory's dusty windows, making him squint. "Thank you for the ride," Ethan said, his voice thick with gratitude. "Really, you've done more than enough." Tyler smiled from behind the steering wheel, his young face radiating a warmth that seemed beyond his years. "It's no problem at all, Mr. Cole. Good luck in there. You've got this." Ethan nodded, trying to draw strength from the boy's confidence. His dress shoes, scuffed but polished as best he could manage, clicked against the concrete as he made his way to the entrance. The weight of his empty stomach felt lighter now, the sandwich Tyler had given him earlier having taken the edge off his hunger. Behind him, he could hear Tyler's fingers tapping away at his phone screen. The boy had insisted on waiting, just in case. Ethan hadn't had the heart to argue, though the kindness made his chest ache with a mixture of gratitude and shame. The factory's lobby was small but clean, with motivational posters adorning the walls and a tired-looking ficus plant drooping in the corner. A middle-aged receptionist looked up from her computer, her reading glasses perched on the end of her nose. "I'm here for the supervisor position interview," Ethan said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Ethan Cole." The receptionist's face fell slightly. "Oh, let me get Mr. Richardson for you." The knot in Ethan's stomach tightened as she disappeared down a hallway. A few minutes later, a man in a navy suit emerged, his expression already apologetic. "Mr. Cole?" The man extended his hand. "I'm Dave Richardson. Please, step into my office for a moment." The office was small and cluttered with papers, the walls lined with production charts and safety regulations. Mr. Richardson gestured to a chair across from his desk. "I'm afraid I have some unfortunate news," he began, shuffling some papers on his desk. "The position was filled earlier this morning. One of our internal candidates accepted the promotion." The words hit Ethan like a physical blow. He forced himself to maintain his composure, though his hands trembled slightly in his lap. "I see," he managed to say. "Your resume is impressive," Mr. Richardson continued, holding up the paper Ethan had emailed ahead. 15 years of supervisory experience. Excellent references. We'll certainly keep your information on file for any future openings." Ethan knew what that meant. His resume would join countless others in a drawer, never to see daylight again. He stood up, legs feeling wooden. "Thank you for your time," he said quietly, extending his hand. Mr. Richardson shook it with an extra squeeze of sympathy. The walk back through the lobby felt like miles. Each step echoed with the weight of another disappointment, another dead end. The morning sunshine now seemed harsh and mocking as he pushed through the glass doors. Tyler was leaning against his car, still scrolling through his phone. He looked up as Ethan approached, and his expression shifted immediately upon seeing Ethan's face. "They filled it already," Ethan said before Tyler could ask, his voice rough. "Internal promotion." Tyler's face softened with genuine concern. "I'm sorry, Mr. Cole. That's rough." Ethan ran a hand through his hair, trying to gather his thoughts. He needed to get home, to figure out what to do next. The bus schedule was probably shot now. He'd missed his intended route while unconscious at the stop. "Listen," Tyler said, pocketing his phone. "Let me buy you lunch before I drop you home. There's a good diner just around the corner." "No, you've done too much already. I couldn't." Ethan's protest was cut short by a loud, traitorous growl from his stomach. The single sandwich from earlier had barely dented his hunger after days of next to nothing. Tyler grinned, but there was no mockery in it, only warmth. "Sounds like your stomach is outvoting you, Mr. Cole. Come on, their meatloaf special is amazing." Ethan wanted to refuse. His pride demanded it, but the thought of facing another long walk home on an empty stomach, only to return to his children with more bad news, it was too much. "Just this once," he conceded quietly. "And please, call me Ethan." Tyler's face lit up. "Great, hop in, Ethan. It's just down on Baker Street." As they pulled away from the factory, Ethan watched its brick walls recede in the side mirror. Another door closed, but somehow his despair felt different this time. Less crushing, less absolute. Maybe it was the simple presence of someone who seemed to care, even if that someone was a stranger half his age. The silver car glided smoothly through the streets of the small Tennessee town, past mom-and-pop shops and churches, with their steeples reaching toward the clear autumn sky. Tyler hummed softly along with the radio, his fingers tapping the steering wheel in rhythm. "The diner's family-owned," Tyler explained as they drove. "Miss Betty's been running it for 30 years. Wait until you try her cornbread. It's like eating a piece of heaven." A small smile tugged at the corner of Ethan's mouth despite himself. The boy's enthusiasm was infectious, making it hard to hold on to the dark cloud of disappointment. They pulled into the parking lot of a classic American diner, its red and chrome exterior gleaming in the midday sunday. The neon sign proclaimed Betty's Home Cooking in cheerful, cursive letters, and through the large windows, Ethan could see the lunch crowd starting to filter in. The smell of cooking food hit him as soon as Tyler opened the car door, making his stomach growl again, louder this time. Tyler laughed good-naturedly. "Sounds like we got here just in time," he said, leading the way to the entrance. The bell above the door chimed as they stepped inside, announcing their arrival to the warm, bustling interior. The diner's interior buzzed with the comfortable hum of lunchtime conversation and clinking silverware. Warm sunlight streamed through the large windows, casting a golden glow on the red vinyl booths. A waitress in a crisp blue uniform approached their table, her name tag reading, Margaret. Her eyes settled on Ethan, and a flicker of recognition crossed her face. She'd seen him before, back when he used to bring Emma and Luke here for Saturday morning pancakes. Before everything fell apart, her smile turned gentle, almost pitying, as she pulled out her notepad. "Here you go, On," Margaret said softly, sliding a kid's menu toward Ethan. The paper placemat was covered in colorful cartoons and simple word puzzles. Heat crept up Ethan's neck as he stared at the $5.99 children's specials. Tyler didn't miss a beat. "We'll need 2 regular menus, please," he said firmly but politely. "And coffee for both of us?" Ethan nodded, grateful for Tyler's quick intervention. Margaret whisked away the kids' menu and returned with adult ones, her cheeks slightly flushed. "The meatloaf special's real good today," she offered, her tone apologetic. Tyler grinned. "Perfect. 2 specials then, with all the fixings, please." After Margaret left, silence settled between them. Ethan fidgeted with his paper napkin, folding and unfolding the corners. The diner's walls were covered in old photographs of the town, and his eyes landed on one from the factory's early days. He remembered better times, when he'd supervised the evening shift, when his wallet wasn't empty, when Sarah was still. "You know," Tyler said, interrupting Ethan's thoughts, "my mom used to fold napkins like that when she was worried about bills." Ethan's hands stilled. He looked up at Tyler, really studying him for the first time. Despite his expensive clothes and car, there was something in the boy's eyes that spoke of understanding, not pity. "It's been hard," Ethan found himself saying. The words came slowly at first, then faster, like a dam breaking. "My wife, Sarah, she got sick 3 years ago. Cancer. We thought the insurance would cover it, but..." He swallowed hard, staring into his coffee cup. "By the time she passed, we'd lost everything except the house. Then the accident at work." Tyler listened intently, his young face serious. He didn't interrupt or offer empty platitudes, just nodded occasionally, his eyes full of genuine concern. Margaret returned with their food, steaming plates of meatloaf, mashed potatoes, and green beans. The portions were generous, and the aroma made Ethan's mouth water. "The kids, Emma and Luke, they're so young," Ethan continued, cutting into his meatloaf. "Emma tries to be strong, acts like a little mother sometimes. And Luke, he barely remembers Sarah now. That might be harder than if he did remember." "How old are they?" Tyler asked, passing the salt shaker. 8 and 6. Ethan managed a small smile. "Good kids. Better than I deserve, really. They never complain, even when..." He trailed off, thinking of empty cupboards and missed meals. "You're doing the best you can," Tyler said firmly. "That's what matters." They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes. The meatloaf was indeed excellent, just as Tyler had promised. Ethan couldn't remember the last time he'd had a proper meal like this. "Can I tell you something?" Tyler set down his fork, his expression thoughtful. "I run this small online business. Nothing fancy, just connecting local artisans with buyers. But we set aside part of our profits for community causes." He pulled out his phone, showing Ethan a simple website called Hearts and Hands. "See, I believe in lifting others, not judging them," Tyler continued. "Everyone needs help sometimes. The trick is creating opportunities, not handouts. Dignity matters." Ethan nodded slowly, something warming in his chest that wasn't just the coffee. The way Tyler spoke, it wasn't the rehearsed speech of someone trying to show off their charity. There was genuine passion in his voice. And something else. Personal experience? "My mom raised me alone," Tyler added, as if reading Ethan's thoughts. "Worked 3 jobs sometimes. We got by with help from others. And now..." He shrugged, a small smile playing at his lips. "Now it's my turn to pass it forward." As they finished their meals, Margaret brought the check. Before Ethan could protest, Tyler had already handed over his card. "Thank you," Ethan said quietly. "Not just for lunch, but for listening, for understanding." Tyler pulled out a napkin and wrote something on it with a pen from his pocket. "This is my number," he said, sliding it across the table. "If you ever need help or work, call me. I mean it." He stood up, leaving Ethan sitting in the booth. The napkin felt heavy in Ethan's hands as he watched Tyler head toward the door, his figure silhouetted against the bright afternoon sun streaming through the windows. Questions swirled in his mind about this remarkable young man who had appeared out of nowhere to help a stranger. The bell above the door chimed as Tyler left, and Ethan sat there, turning the napkin over in his hands, wondering who Tyler Brooks really was. The setting sun painted long shadows across the Cole family's small front yard as Ethan walked up the cracked concrete path to his house. His stomach felt full for the first time in days, and the weight of the paper bag containing leftover sandwiches from the diner gave him a small measure of comfort. The sound of his footsteps on the wooden porch steps triggered immediate activity inside. The front door burst open before he could reach for the handle. Emma and Luke rushed out, their faces bright with excitement. Emma's brown pigtails bounced as she jumped up and down, while 6-year-old Luke wrapped himself around Ethan's leg like a little monkey. "Daddy, you're back!" Luke squealed, his grip tightening. Emma's sharp eyes caught sight of the paper bag in his hand, and her face lit up with hope. "You found a job, didn't you?" she asked, practically bouncing with excitement. "That's why you have food." Ethan managed a faint smile, his heart heavy with the complexity of the truth. He couldn't bring himself to disappoint those shining eyes, but he couldn't lie either. "Well, sweetie, something good did happen today. Let's go inside, and I'll tell you all about it." The children followed him into their modest kitchen, where the bare cupboards stood as silent reminders of their situation. Ethan set the bag on the small table and lifted Luke into his chair while Emma climbed into hers, both children watching eagerly as he unpacked the sandwiches. "I met someone today," Ethan began, carefully splitting a turkey sandwich between his children. "A very kind young man named Tyler. Is he nice?" Luke asked through a mouthful of bread. "The nicest?" Ethan confirmed, watching them eat with relief in his heart. "He's just a teenager, but he has a big heart. When I wasn't feeling well at the bus stop, he helped me out." Emma's forehead wrinkled with concern. "You weren't feeling well? Why didn't you tell us?" Ethan reached across the table and squeezed her small hand. "Just a little dizzy spell, sweetheart. But Tyler, he made sure I was okay. He bought me lunch and even drove me to my interview." "Like a guardian angel," Emma declared, her eyes wide with wonder. Ethan couldn't help but smile at her innocent assessment. You know what? Maybe he was. As they ate, Ethan shared more details about Tyler, carefully editing out the more worrying parts of his day. He described Tyler's kind eyes and gentle manner, his determination to help a stranger, and how he'd insisted on buying lunch. The children hung on every word, their imaginations painting Tyler as a mysterious hero. "Can we meet him?" Luke asked hopefully. "Maybe someday," Ethan replied, though uncertainty gnawed at him. Would Tyler really want anything more to do with their family's struggles? The evening passed with an unusual peace settling over their small home. The weight of constant worry that had been Ethan's companion for months seemed lighter, if only temporarily. After dinner, he helped Luke with his reading homework while Emma worked on her math problems at the kitchen table, her pencil moving with careful determination. When bedtime came, both children went without their usual protests. Perhaps the full meals in their bellies had made them sleepy, or maybe they sensed their father's improved mood and didn't want to disturb it. Ethan tucked them in, kissing their foreheads and whispering, "I love you," to each one. "Daddy," Emma called as he reached her bedroom door. "Yes, sweetie? I'm glad you met Tyler today," she said softly. "You smiled more tonight." Ethan's throat tightened with emotion. "Get some sleep, Angel," he managed to say before quietly closing her door. In the silence of the living room, Ethan sank into his worn armchair and pulled out the napkin with Tyler's number. The blue ink stood out against the white paper, the digits neat and clear. His thumb traced over the numbers as doubt crept in. Pride warred with necessity in his mind. Tyler had already done so much. Was it right to accept more help? But then he thought of Emma's observant words about his smile, of Luke's eager questions about their mysterious benefactor. He thought about the empty cupboards and the stack of unpaid bills in his drawer. With slightly trembling fingers, Ethan pulled out his old flip phone. He stared at it for several long moments, composing and rejecting different messages in his mind. Finally, he typed out a simple text. "Thank you again for today." He pressed send before he could second-guess himself, then set the phone down on the small table beside his chair. He didn't expect an immediate response. It was getting late, and surely Tyler had better things to do than... The phone buzzed, making him jump. The screen lit up with a new message. Ethan picked it up and read Tyler's reply. "Glad you're okay. Let's meet tomorrow. I have an idea." The morning sun streamed through the windows of the Corner Cup coffee shop, casting warm patches of light across the worn wooden tables. Ethan sat nervously in a corner booth, his fingers wrapped around a paper cup of black coffee that Tyler had insisted on buying. The coffee shop hummed with the quiet conversations of early morning customers and the gentle whir of the espresso machine. Tyler breezed through the door right on time, carrying a sleek laptop bag and wearing a simple blue sweater that made him look even younger than his 17 years. His easy smile put Ethan at ease, though Ethan couldn't help but notice how out of place he felt in his own threadbare jacket. "Good morning, Mr. Cole." Tyler slid into the seat across from him, already pulling out his laptop. "I hope you don't mind, but I got here a little early and ordered us some breakfast sandwiches." "Tyler, you really don't have to," Ethan began, but Tyler waved off his protest. "Please, let's just eat while we talk. I have something important to share with you." As if on cue, a waitress appeared with 2 steaming sandwiches wrapped in paper. Tyler opened his laptop and turned it toward Ethan. The screen showed a professional-looking website with the words "Hearts and Hands" across the top, accompanied by photos of smiling families and community events. "This is my main project," Tyler explained, his voice filled with quiet passion. "Everyone knows about big charities, but sometimes people fall through the cracks. They need more than just handouts. They need a chance to rebuild their dignity." Ethan nodded, understanding all too well. His throat tightened as he thought of the empty cupboards at home. "The program is pretty simple," Tyler continued, scrolling through the website. "We connect struggling parents with part-time work opportunities. Sometimes it's helping organize donation drives. Sometimes it's basic warehouse logistics, or even teaching others their skills. The point is, everyone has something to offer." Ethan took a bite of his sandwich to hide his emotion. The warmth of the food and Tyler's sincere words made his chest ache with hope, a feeling he'd almost forgotten. "I'll be honest with you, Mr. Cole. When I saw you yesterday at the bus stop, I recognized that look. My mom had the same look when I was younger, trying to keep our family afloat by herself." Tyler's voice softened. "But you have skills from your factory supervision days that we really need." "What exactly would I be doing?" Ethan asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Tyler's eyes lit up. He pulled out a tablet and showed Ethan a calendar. "We have 3 donation centers in the county. They're a mess, no proper inventory system, no efficient distribution plan. You managed an entire factory floor. I need someone who knows how to organize people and resources." For the first time in months, Ethan felt a spark of professional pride. He glanced at the logistics diagrams on Tyler's tablet and immediately saw ways to improve the flow. "The pay isn't huge," Tyler admitted, sliding an envelope across the table. "But it's steady, 20 hours a week to start. And this," he tapped the envelope, "is an advance. Get some groceries for your kids. Consider it an investment in our future success." Ethan stared at the envelope, his hand trembling slightly as he reached for it. "I don't know what to say, Tyler." "Say you'll start Monday," Tyler grinned. 9 a.m. at the main center. I'll text you the address." They spent the next hour going over basic details, schedule, responsibilities, and the center's layout. Tyler's enthusiasm was contagious, and Ethan found himself making suggestions about storage solutions and volunteer coordination. As they wrapped up their meeting, Tyler's phone buzzed with messages. "Sorry, got to run investor meeting," he said, gathering his things. "But Mr. Cole, this is going to work out great. I can feel it." Ethan watched the teenager dash out, marveling at how someone so young could have such a clear vision for helping others. He carefully tucked the envelope into his jacket pocket and headed to the grocery store. Walking through the aisles with an actual budget felt surreal. Ethan filled his cart with essentials, bread, milk, eggs, fruit, and even some of Emma's favorite cereal. Each item represented a small victory against the crushing poverty of recent months. The walk home with his grocery bags felt lighter than any journey he'd made in recent memory. The morning sun had grown stronger, warming his back as he walked. Tears welled up in his eyes, but for once, they weren't from despair. "Thank you, God," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. The weight of the grocery bags in his hands felt like answered prayers. Little did he know, this blessing would soon be tested in ways he never imagined. The community warehouse buzzed with early morning activity as volunteers sorted through mountains of donated clothes, food, and household items. Sunlight filtered through the high windows, catching dust motes that danced in the air. Ethan stood at a long folding table, carefully organizing canned goods by expiration date. "Hey Marcus," he called out to a younger volunteer who was tossing cans haphazardly into boxes. "Come here a minute." The teen shuffled over, his oversized hoodie hanging loose on his thin frame. "See these dates?" Ethan pointed to the bottom of a can. "We want to put the oldest ones up front so they get used first. That way, nothing goes to waste." Marcus nodded, a small smile breaking through his usually tough expression. "Makes sense. Thanks, Mr. Cole. Just Ethan is fine," he replied, returning the smile. It felt good to be teaching again, to feel useful. After a week at the warehouse, he'd fallen into an easy rhythm with the other volunteers, especially the younger ones who reminded him of his own children. The warehouse door rolled open with a metallic groan, and Tyler walked in carrying 2 cardboard trays of coffee. "Morning, everyone," he called out, setting the drinks on a nearby table. "Thought you all could use a pick-me-up." The volunteers gathered around, grateful for the warm beverages. Ethan noticed how Tyler greeted each person by name, asking about their families or following up on previous conversations. Despite being worth millions, the teen wore simple jeans and a plain t-shirt, helping sort donations alongside everyone else. "How's the new system working out?" Tyler asked, joining Ethan at his station. "Really well," Ethan replied, gesturing to the organized shelves. "We've got better inventory control now, and the families can find what they need much faster." He paused, feeling a surge of pride. "Some of the kids are really catching on too," Tyler beamed. "I knew you'd be perfect for this. You've got a way with people, especially the younger ones." Ethan felt his chest tighten with emotion. In just a week, Tyler had become like the son he never had. Their age difference melting away in the face of their shared mission. They worked side by side through the morning, trading stories and gentle jokes. Around noon, Tyler's phone buzzed. His face fell as he read the screen. "Everything okay?" Ethan asked, noting the sudden change. "Just some stuff online," Tyler mumbled, quickly pocketing the phone. But later, during lunch break, Ethan caught him scrolling through what looked like social media comments, his shoulders tense. The afternoon brought a steady stream of families picking up supplies. Ethan watched Tyler interact with each one, his genuine care evident in every interaction. A young mother with 3 small children came in, looking overwhelmed. Tyler helped her find winter coats for her kids, then secretly added extra food to her box when she wasn't looking. "You're good at this," Ethan commented after she left. Tyler shrugged. "Mom always said blessed to be a blessing." His phone buzzed again, and this time Ethan glimpsed the screen. "Hearts and hands equals scam. Don't trust this fake charity." "Want to talk about it?" Ethan asked quietly. Tyler hesitated. "Someone started spreading rumors online, saying I'm running a fraud, that the money isn't really helping people." His voice cracked slightly. "They're calling me a rich kid playing poverty tourist." The warehouse had emptied out, most volunteers gone for the day. The setting sun cast long shadows through the windows, and the space felt suddenly too big, too quiet. Ethan watched as Tyler sat down heavily on a stack of boxes, scrolling through more comments. The boy's usual confidence had crumbled, replaced by something raw and vulnerable. More cruel comments filled the screen. "Teenage millionaire? Yeah, right. Show us the proof." And "Who does this kid think he's fooling?" Ethan remembered his own dark moments of doubt, the nights when he'd questioned everything. He moved closer, placing a gentle hand on Tyler's shoulder. "Truth always finds its way," he said softly. Tyler looked up, his eyes reflecting both gratitude and uncertainty in the dim warehouse light. "Those people writing those comments?" Ethan continued. "They weren't here today. They didn't see that mother's face when you found coats for her kids. They don't see the real work happening in this warehouse every single day." A door slammed somewhere in the building, echoing through the empty space. Tyler's phone continued to buzz with notifications, but he didn't look at it again. Instead, he stared at the shelves of sorted donations, at the boxes ready for tomorrow's families, at the simple evidence of good work done well. Ethan squeezed his shoulder once more, the gesture carrying the weight of understanding that only comes from having weathered similar storms. In that quiet moment, as darkness settled outside and the warehouse grew still, 2 souls connected by circumstance found strength in each other's presence. The morning sun cast long shadows through the warehouse windows as Tyler sat hunched over his laptop, his usual bright demeanor dimmed. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, evidence of another sleepless night. Ethan watched from across the room, his heart heavy, as he witnessed the 17-year-old's shoulders slump further with each email he opened. "Another one gone," Tyler muttered, running his fingers through his disheveled hair. "Third partner this morning." Ethan set down the box he was carrying and walked over. The screen displayed a harsh message from a business partner, filled with accusations about Hearts and Hands being a fraudulent operation. The words stung even from a distance. "We cannot risk our reputation by associating with an organization under such scrutiny. They're saying I'm too young to run something legitimate," Tyler said, his voice barely above a whisper. "That I must be running some kind of scam." He clicked through several news articles, each headline more damaging than the last. "Teen Millionaire's charity under investigation. Hearts and Hands Helper Hoax. The warehouse felt eerily quiet now, with only the hum of fluorescent lights overhead. Several volunteers cast worried glances in their direction, whispering among themselves. Ethan noticed Tyler's hands trembling slightly as he closed another angry email. "I just wanted to help people," Tyler said, closing his eyes. "Like my mom helped others when we had nothing." His voice cracked on the last word. Something stirred in Ethan's chest, a familiar protective instinct, the same one he felt when his own children were hurting. Without hesitation, he pulled up a chair next to Tyler. "Give me your laptop," Ethan said firmly. Tyler looked up, confused. "What?" "Trust me." Ethan's fingers hovered over the keyboard once Tyler handed it over. He opened a blank document and began typing, speaking softly as he wrote, "My name is Ethan Cole. 3 days ago, I was a father who couldn't feed his children. I was the man who fainted at a bus stop from hunger, too proud to ask for help, and I was the person Tyler Brooks stopped to save." His words flowed naturally, describing that morning at the bus stop, the simple kindness of a sandwich offered without judgment, and the dignity Tyler had shown him at the diner. He wrote about Hearts and Hands, not as some faceless charity, but as a lifeline for real people with real struggles. "This boy, whom some call too young to be trusted, has more wisdom and compassion than most adults I've known," Ethan typed. "He didn't just give me food or work, he gave me back my self-respect. How do you measure the worth of that?" Tyler read over his shoulder, silent tears rolling down his cheeks. Ethan kept writing, describing the warehouse full of volunteers, the families being helped, the community being rebuilt, one act of kindness at a time. By mid-morning, Ethan's letter had been shared thousands of times. Local news stations picked up the story. Other families helped by Hearts and Hands began adding their own testimonials. The tide of public opinion started to shift, but as one crisis began to ease, another loomed. Ethan's phone buzzed with a text from Carl Jenkins, his old foreman at the factory. "Place is shutting down. Corporate says we're not profitable enough. 200 families about to lose everything." Ethan's stomach clenched. He knew those families, had worked alongside them for years. Many were already struggling, living paycheck to paycheck. The factory's closure would devastate the entire community. Tyler noticed Ethan's expression darken. "What's wrong?" Ethan showed him the message. "The factory. It's where I worked before my injury, where most of our volunteers' families were. If it closes." He didn't need to finish the sentence. Tyler scrolled through the comments now flooding his social media. People offering donations, support, and apologies for doubting Hearts and Hands. The organization's reputation was recovering, but Ethan could see that Tyler's mind was already racing ahead to a bigger challenge. "All these donations coming in," Ethan said, gesturing to Tyler's screen. "They're wonderful, but kind words won't keep food on these families' tables when the factory closes." He stood up, walking to the warehouse window. Outside, he could see the factory's smokestacks in the distance, silent now, but still standing, a symbol of both what they could lose and what they might save. "We can't just fix people's hearts," Ethan said, turning back to Tyler. "We need to help them feed their families." Tyler nodded slowly, his expression shifting from despair to determination. The same spark that had driven him to build his business from nothing began to gleam in his eyes again. "You're right," he said, pulling out his notebook, "and I think I know how we can do both." The old town hall buzzed with nervous energy as workers packed the wooden benches and lined the walls. The musty air grew thick with tension and worry. Local news cameras clicked and whirred near the back, their red lights blinking like tiny warning signals in the dim room. Ethan sat in the front row, his worn work boots tapping against the creaky floorboards. He glanced at Tyler, who stood near the podium reviewing his notes. The teenager's usual confidence seemed shaken, but determination burned in his eyes. Factory foreman Carl Jenkins occupied the first row opposite Ethan, his weathered face set in stone. Around him clustered dozens of factory workers, their expressions a mix of hope and skepticism. Some still wore their work uniforms, having come straight from their final shift. "Evening, everyone," Tyler began, his young voice steady despite the pressure. "I know many of you are worried about the factory closing. I'm here because I believe we can do something about it." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Dana Klein, the TV reporter, leaned forward with her microphone, her eyes sharp with interest. "Hearts and Hands isn't just about charity," Tyler continued. "It's about building community. And right now, our community needs help." Someone in the back called out, "We need jobs, not handouts." Ethan stood up then, facing the crowd. His voice, though quiet, carried across the room. "I was where you are now, broke, scared, too proud to accept help. He paused, letting his words sink in. But sometimes help isn't a handout, it's a hand up. The room grew still. These people knew Ethan. They'd worked alongside him, shared lunch breaks with him, watched him struggle after his injury. Tyler outlined the plan, his confidence growing. While we fight to reopen the factory, Hearts and Hands will hire laid-off workers for community projects. Full pay, real work, rebuilding parks, renovating schools, helping elderly neighbors with home repairs. Foreman Jenkins stood up, arms crossed. And where's this money coming from? Some teenager's internet business? Yes, Tyler answered simply. Every penny I've earned is going into this community, because I believe in you, all of you. Jenkins' expression softened slightly, but doubt still lingered in his eyes. That's a lot of workers to pay. We've secured additional funding from private donors, Tyler explained. They've seen what we've accomplished here. They believe in second chances. Dana Klein raised her hand. Tyler, some are calling this a publicity stunt to counter the recent allegations against your foundation. Your response? Before Tyler could answer, Ethan stepped forward. I was the first person Tyler helped. He found me at a bus stop, half-starved, too ashamed to admit I couldn't feed my kids. His voice cracked slightly. He didn't know me anything, but he showed me kindness when I needed it most. The room fell silent. Several workers nodded, remembering their own moments of need. This isn't about publicity, Ethan continued. It's about neighbors, helping neighbors. About keeping our community alive while we fight for our factory. A worker stood up, her name tag reading, Sarah. What kind of timeline are we looking at? Tyler moved to a whiteboard and sketched out a 3-month plan. Phase 1 starts tomorrow. Community projects, job training, and legal support to challenge the factory closure. Every worker gets full hours, fair pay. More hands went up, more questions followed. Tyler and Ethan answered each one honestly, acknowledging the risks but emphasizing the possibilities. As the meeting progressed, the mood in the room gradually shifted from skepticism to cautious hope. Finally, Foreman Jenkins rose again. The room hushed, waiting. He walked slowly to the front, studying Tyler's face. You remind me of someone, Jenkins said quietly. My son's age. He had big dreams too. He paused, looking around the room at his workers. But you've got something he didn't have. Action behind those dreams. Jenkins extended his hand to Tyler. If these good people are willing to trust you, then so am I. Tyler grasped the foreman's hand firmly, the handshake sealing their agreement. The room erupted in applause, camera flashes capturing the moment. Dana Klein approached with her microphone, but Jenkins waved her off. Story's not in the handshake, he said gruffly. Story's in what happens next. The workers began filing out, talking among themselves with renewed energy. Some stopped to shake Tyler's hand or pat Ethan's shoulder. The old town hall, which had felt like a funeral home when they entered, now hummed with possibility. The morning sun painted golden streaks across Main Street as Ethan surveyed the bustling scene before him. A dozen volunteers in Hearts and Hands t-shirts worked on the old Anderson house, their hammers creating a steady rhythm against weathered boards. Mrs. Anderson, a widow in her 70s, watched from her porch swing, tears of gratitude glistening in her eyes. Looking good, everyone, Ethan called out, checking items off his clipboard. The past week had transformed not just homes, but spirits. What started as emergency aid for laid-off factory workers had bloomed into something bigger. A movement of neighbors, helping neighbors. Tyler approached, carrying coffee cups. Thought you could use this, he said, handing one to Ethan. 3 projects completed already this week. You're amazing at organizing these crews. Ethan accepted the coffee with a grateful nod. These folks just needed a chance to help others. Gives them purpose while we work on reopening the factory. He watched as Mark, a former line supervisor, carefully taught 2 teenagers how to replace rotting porch steps. See that? They're not just fixing houses. They're passing on skills. Throughout the morning, Ethan moved between project sites across town. At Jefferson Park, another team cleared debris and repaired playground equipment. Children watched excitedly as fresh paint brightened their rusty swing set. Parents who lost jobs worked alongside retirees and high school students, their shared purpose bridging old divides. At lunch, they gathered in the community center. The space hummed with conversation as workers shared sandwiches and stories. Ethan noticed how people who'd once barely nodded to each other now sat together, laughing and planning future projects. Mr. Cole, called Sarah, a local reporter from the Chronicle. Got a minute? She held up her notebook. The whole town's talking about these projects. Would you share what inspired all this? Ethan shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Oh, I'm just coordinating. It's everyone else doing the real work. That's not what they say, Sarah pressed gently. They say you're the heart of it all. The way you match people's skills to needs. How you encourage everyone. Tyler, overhearing, jumped in. She's right, Ethan. You're the heart of hearts and hands. I may have started it, but you made it work. Ethan felt his cheeks warm. I just write down what I'm grateful for each day. Helps me see the good things. He pulled out his worn notebook. Like today, watching Bill teach those kids carpentry, or Ginny organizing the lunch program for workers' families. Small things add up. Sarah's eyes lit up. Would you share one of your gratitude notes for the paper? People could use some hope right now. After some gentle persuading, Ethan agreed. He chose a simple entry from the day before. Grateful today for second chances, for hammers that build instead of break, for neighbors who become family, for children who remind us to dream. Most of all, for a town that refuses to let anyone fall alone. The afternoon brought more progress. Ethan worked alongside the crews, his quiet leadership drawing out the best in everyone. When Mrs. Peterson worried about accepting help with her leaking roof, he shared his own story of learning to receive grace through hard times. As evening approached, the work sites wound down. Ethan headed home, his shirt dusty but his heart full. Emma and Luke ran to meet him at the door, eager to hear about the day's adventures. Did you fix Mrs. Anderson's house? Emma asked, helping him remove his work boots. We sure did, sweetheart. The whole team pitched in. Luke tugged his sleeve. Can we help tomorrow? I'm good at painting. Ethan smiled, leading them to their bedroom. Maybe on the weekend. Right now, it's bedtime for my favorite helpers. As he tucked them in, Emma asked sleepily, Daddy, why are you always smiling now? Ethan sat on the edge of the bed, smoothing her hair. Because I learned something important. Good things happen when we choose hope. Luke yawned. Like when Tyler helped us? Exactly like that, buddy. Ethan kissed their foreheads and turned out the light. In the living room, he heard distant thunder rumbling. Dark clouds gathered on the horizon, their shapes ominous against the setting Sunday. The wind picked up, rattling the window panes gently. The morning dew still clung to the grass when the television van pulled up outside the Hearts and Hands warehouse. Cameramen and producers bustled about, setting up equipment while Ethan watched from the doorway, tugging nervously at his collar. You look fine, Tyler assured him, straightening his own tie. At 17, he somehow seemed more comfortable with the media attention than Ethan. Just be yourself. That's what people connect with. The news anchor, Sarah Chen, approached them with a warm smile. Her red blazer looked stark against the worn brick building behind her. We'll start with some footage of the work being done, then sit down for the interview. Just relax and tell your story. The cameras followed them through the warehouse where volunteers sorted donations and packed care boxes. Ethan fell into his element here, explaining their system while greeting workers by name. Mike here used to run quality control at the factory, he said, patting a gray-haired man's shoulder. Now he makes sure every family gets exactly what they need. They filmed the loading dock where trucks departed for deliveries, the classroom where job training sessions were held, and the community garden started by laid-off workers. Tyler spoke about the program's vision, while Ethan shared personal stories of lives changed. Finally, they settled into the small office for the formal interview. Sarah sat across from them, notepad ready. Tyler, you're 17 and already running $1 million operation. What drives you? Tyler's answer came from the heart. When I was little, my mom worked 3 jobs to keep us fed. I promised myself if I ever made it, I'd help others like us. But honestly, he gestured to Ethan. He's the real hero here. I just provided resources. He showed us how to use them right. Ethan, Sarah turned to him. You went from needing help to helping hundreds. How does that feel? Ethan's voice softened. Humbling. When Tyler found me at that bus stop, I'd lost hope. Now I see that same hope return to other people's eyes. That's worth more than any paycheck. The interview continued, covering the factory situation, community response, and future plans. Both men spoke with quiet conviction, their genuine partnership evident in how they complemented each other's answers. After the crew packed up, Tyler and Ethan watched the van drive away. That went well, Tyler said, relief in his voice. This should help spread the word. The segment aired that evening on national news. Phones started ringing immediately. Other communities wanting to start similar programs, potential donors pledging support. Social media lit up with shares and positive comments. But by midnight, the tide turned. Tyler's phone buzzed with urgent messages. Someone had leaked financial documents. carefully edited to suggest donation money was being funneled into his personal accounts. The source: a rival charity organization that had been losing donors to Hearts and Hands. Ethan found Tyler in his office at 2 a.m., staring at his computer screen as online comments shifted from praise to accusations. The boy's face looked pale in the monitor's glow. "Look at this," Tyler whispered, scrolling through a flood of angry posts. "Teen fraud exploits poor families. Where did the money really go? They're even dragging my mother into it." His voice cracked. "All those years she worked so hard to raise me right." Major donors sent emails withdrawing support. Corporate partners demanded explanations. The website crashed from negative traffic. Ethan watched the numbers in their donation tracker flatline. Weeks of progress vanished in hours. The warehouse full of supplies suddenly felt like a weight instead of a blessing. Tyler slumped in his chair, looking every bit his 17 years. "They're going to destroy everything we built." His hands trembled as he closed the laptop. Ethan stood straight, years of factory supervisor authority returning to his voice. He clenched his fists at his sides. "Not if I can help it." The old Ethan would have crumbled under this pressure. But that was before Tyler's kindness, before discovering his own strength, before seeing how much good they could do together. Now he had something worth fighting for. The lights of passing cars cast moving shadows through the office window. Father and son in all but blood, they faced the darkness together. One running on empty, the other finally full of purpose. "Not if I can help it," Ethan repeated firmly, his words hanging in the quiet office like a promise. The morning sun barely pierced through the heavy clouds as Ethan Cole stood on the steps of First Baptist Church, his worn shoes scuffed against the concrete as he waited for Pastor Mike to arrive. His stomach churned with nervous energy, but determination kept him standing tall. "Brother Ethan," Pastor Mike called out, keys jingling as he approached. "You're here mighty early." "Pastor, I need your help," Ethan said, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "Tyler Brooks, the young man who's been helping so many of us, he's being attacked with lies. I have to set things right." Inside the church office, Ethan shared everything: how Tyler had found him at his lowest moment, how the teen had built a program that lifted up dozens of local families, and how false accusations now threatened to destroy it all. "Let me make some calls," Pastor Mike said, reaching for his phone. "We'll gather the Ministerial Alliance this morning. These other churches need to hear your story." By mid-morning, Ethan had spoken to 3 different congregations. His message was simple but powerful, delivered with the raw honesty of someone who had lived through darkness and found light. "I was hungry, and that boy fed me," Ethan told a packed room at Grace Methodist. "I was lost, and he gave me purpose. Now it's our turn to stand up for him." Between church visits, Ethan walked into WKTN, the local radio station. The receptionist recognized him from the warehouse and ushered him straight to the program director's office. "5 minutes, the director said gruffly. "That's all I can spare." Those 5 minutes turned into 30 as Ethan shared his story. By noon, the station was running hourly segments featuring interviews with families helped by Hearts and Hands. "My children have warm coats this winter because of Tyler Brooks," one mother's voice crackled over the airwaves. "He helped me fix my car so I could keep my job," another testified. At Jerry's Diner, Ethan sat with small business owners during their lunch rush. These were practical people who dealt in facts and figures, yet they listened intently as he spoke of Tyler's integrity. "That boy's programs brought customers back to Main Street," Jerry himself declared, wiping his hands on his apron. "We all saw it happen. Count me in." By early afternoon, social media began to light up. Local shops posted photos of Tyler helping at food drives. Parents shared stories of his kindness to their children. The hardware store owner revealed how Tyler had secretly paid for materials for elderly customers' home repairs. Number Hearts and Hands Reel started trending in their region. Ethan didn't stop. He visited the factory where he used to work, speaking to his former colleagues on their break. These were proud men and women who didn't accept charity easily, but they had seen firsthand how Tyler's program preserved their dignity while helping them through hard times. "Remember when my Tommy was sick?" one worker called out. "Tyler made sure we had gas money to drive him to his treatments in Nashville. And when the Wilson family lost everything in that fire," another added. Hearts and Hands was there the next day. As afternoon faded into evening, donations began trickling back in. First locally, then from surrounding counties. People shared links to the program's website, accompanying them with their personal stories of hope. The sun was setting when Ethan finally returned to the warehouse. His feet ached, his voice was hoarse, but his spirit soared. He found Tyler in his office, staring at his computer screen in disbelief. "Ethan," Tyler whispered, his eyes wet with tears. "Look at this." The screen showed hundreds of new messages, each one a testament to Hearts and Hands' impact. Photos of repaired homes, smiling families, and community events flooded their social media feeds. The false accusations were drowning in a sea of genuine gratitude. "I don't understand," Tyler said, shaking his head. "How did you do this?" "I just told the truth," Ethan replied simply. "People needed to remember who you really are." Tyler stood up, his usual confidence replaced by humble amazement. "You didn't just save the program," he said softly. "You saved me." The two stood in comfortable silence as the last rays of sunlight painted the warehouse walls in warm gold. Outside, cars pulled into the parking lot, community members arriving with casseroles, baked goods, and cards of support. The tide hadn't just turned, it had become a wave of love, washing away all doubt. The factory whistle pierced the crisp morning air for the first time in months. Workers streamed through the gates, their lunchboxes swinging and work boots clomping against the pavement. Foreman Carl Jenkins stood at the entrance, checking names off his clipboard with a proud smile that crinkled the corners of his weathered eyes. "Welcome back, everyone," he called out, his gruff voice warmer than usual. "Let's make it a good first day." Ethan watched from across the street, his heart swelling with pride. The sight of familiar faces returning to work, some wiping tears from their eyes, made everything they'd fought for worth it. The community fundraising campaign had exceeded all expectations, bringing in enough money to not only reopen the factory, but upgrade some of the aging equipment. Tyler stood beside him, hands in his pockets, looking impossibly young in his pressed shirt and tie. "I still can't believe we pulled this off," he said softly. "You pulled it off," Ethan corrected him. "Your vision made this possible." "No," Tyler shook his head. "We did this together. The whole town did." A small crowd had gathered for the reopening ceremony. Local news cameras rolled as the mayor cut a red ribbon stretched across the factory entrance. People cheered and clapped, some holding handmade signs that read, "Thank you, Tyler," and "Hearts and Hands saved our town." The mayor stepped up to a makeshift podium. "Today marks a new chapter for our community," she announced. "Thanks to the extraordinary efforts of Tyler Brooks and his Hearts and Hands initiative, over 200 jobs have been saved. But more than that, we've discovered what we can achieve when we come together." The applause was thunderous. Someone started chanting, "Tyler, Tyler," until the whole crowd joined in. Tyler's face flushed red as he tried to wave off the attention. The ceremony continued with various speakers, including Carl Jenkins, who surprised everyone by getting emotional during his speech. "I've worked in this factory for 30 years, he said, his voice rough. "Never thought I'd see a teenager teach us old-timers about faith and perseverance. Tyler, son, you're one of us now." After the speeches, Tyler pulled Ethan aside. "I have something to tell you," he said, fidgeting with his tie. "The board met yesterday. They want you to take over as permanent director of Hearts and Hands local operations." Ethan blinked in surprise. "Me? But You're perfect for it," Tyler interrupted. "Everyone trusts you. You understand what people are going through because you've been there. Plus," he grinned, "you're basically already doing the job anyway." Before Ethan could respond, they were surrounded by well-wishers and reporters. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of handshakes and interviews. That evening, Ethan's small house hummed with life and warmth. The kitchen table, once a reminder of empty cupboards and missed meals, now groaned under the weight of a celebration feast. Emma and Luke bounced around excitedly, showing Tyler their school artwork while he helped set the table. "Daddy, can we have Tyler over for dinner every night?" Emma asked, carefully arranging the napkins just so. Ethan laughed. "I think Tyler might have other plans sometimes, sweetheart." "Nope," Tyler grinned, ruffling Luke's hair. "No better plans than this." The change in the house was striking. New curtains brightened the windows, family photos lined the walls again, and the heat worked properly for the first time in months. But the real transformation was in the atmosphere. Hope had replaced despair, laughter had chased away the silence. They sat down to eat, passing dishes back and forth. Luke told animated stories about his day at school, while Emma proudly showed Tyler her math test with a big red A on top. To new beginnings? Tyler raised his glass of soda, looking around the table with genuine happiness. To family? Ethan added softly, meeting Tyler's eyes with fatherly affection. The moment was interrupted by Tyler's phone buzzing on the table. He glanced at it casually, then his face went pale. "Tyler?" Ethan leaned forward, concerned. "What's wrong?" Tyler's hand shook as he held the phone. It's my mom," he stammered. "She's in the hospital. They think." They're saying she had a stroke. The warmth drained from the room. Emma and Luke fell silent, their young faces clouded with worry. I have to go. Tyler stood up so quickly his chair nearly toppled. I need to. Give me your keys, Ethan said firmly, standing up. You're in no condition to drive. But Tyler was already stumbling toward the door, fumbling with his jacket. The hospital's 3 hours away. I have to get there. Tyler! Ethan caught his arm. At least let me. But Tyler pulled away, his eyes wild with fear. She's all I have, he choked out. Then he was gone, the screen door banging shut behind him. Through the window, they watched his car peel away into the darkness, leaving their celebration in shocked silence. Emma clutched her father's hand. Is Tyler's mommy going to be okay? Ethan pulled his daughter close, staring at the empty doorway where their young friend had disappeared. I don't know, sweetheart, he whispered. I don't know. The sounds of Tyler's car faded into the distance, leaving only the quiet tick of the kitchen clock and the cooling plates of forgotten food on the table. The fluorescent lights hummed quietly in the sterile hospital corridor as Ethan made his way through the maze of identical doorways. His worn shoes squeaked against the polished floor, each step echoing in the hushed atmosphere of the late-night ward. Room 412? He found it at last. Through the door's window, he saw Tyler's hunched form. The boy who usually stood so tall now looked small and fragile in the dim hospital lighting. Ethan's heart ached at the sight. He entered softly, not wanting to startle Tyler, who sat motionless beside the hospital bed where his mother lay. The steady beep of monitors provided a rhythmic backdrop to the scene. Medical tubes and wires created a web around Mrs. Brooks's still form, her face peaceful despite the machines surrounding her. Tyler didn't look up when Ethan placed a gentle hand on his shoulder, but his body tensed slightly at the touch before relaxing again. His eyes were red-rimmed, and dark circles beneath them testified to hours of worried vigilance. Hey, Ethan said softly, pulling up another chair. I came as soon as I got the kids settled with Mrs. Henderson next door. Tyler nodded, his gaze fixed on his mother's face. You didn't have to come, he whispered, voice rough from crying. Yes, I did. Ethan squeezed his shoulder. That's what family does. They sat in companionable silence for several minutes, watching the slow rise and fall of Mrs. Brooks' chest. The night shift nurse came in to check vitals, offering them both sympathetic smiles as she worked. When she finished, she turned to Tyler. Dr. Matthews would like to speak with you about your mother's condition. He'll be here in a few minutes. Tyler's hands clenched in his lap. Will you stay? He asked Ethan, sounding younger than his 17 years. Of course. The doctor arrived shortly after, clipboard in hand. He was middle-aged with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Mr. Brooks, he began, I've reviewed your mother's latest scans. The stroke affected a significant portion of her left hemisphere. While she's stable now, we're seeing considerable impact on the brain areas controlling speech and movement on her right side. Tyler's breathing quickened. But she'll recover, right? She's always been strong. Dr. Matthews' expression softened. Recovery from this type of stroke is possible, but it will require extensive rehabilitation. We're looking at months of therapy. And even then, some effects may be permanent. This is my fault, Tyler whispered after the doctor left. His shoulders began to shake. I've been so busy with the foundation, the business, everything. She was working 2 jobs to help me when I started out, and I never made her stop. I should have taken better care of her. Tyler, look at me, Ethan said firmly. When the boy raised his tear-stained face, Ethan continued. Your mother has been proud of every single thing you've done. I've heard her tell everyone at the community center about her amazing son who helps so many people. But I didn't help her enough. Tyler's voice cracked. I was too focused on saving everyone else. Ethan leaned forward in his chair. You know what I see when I look at you? I see a boy who turned his success into a way to lift others up. Where do you think you learned that kind of compassion? From her. She raised you to have a heart for people, and that's exactly what you've done. Tyler wiped his eyes with his sleeve. I'm scared, Ethan. She's all I have. That's not true anymore, Ethan said quietly. You have me. You have Emma and Luke who think you hang the moon. You have an entire town of people whose lives you've touched. They fell silent again, watching the first hints of dawn appear through the window. The sky began to lighten, turning from black to deep blue, then to soft purple. A new day was coming, whether they were ready or not. When Sarah, my wife, was sick, Ethan said slowly, I spent a lot of nights like this, watching her sleep, bargaining with God, blaming myself for not noticing the symptoms sooner. He paused, gathering his thoughts. But you know what I learned? Sometimes the strongest thing we can do is just be present. Your mother knows you're here. She feels it. Tyler reached out and took his mother's hand, careful not to disturb the IV line. I don't know how to do this, he admitted, how to be strong enough for her. You don't have to know right now, Ethan assured him. We'll figure it out together, day by day. The rising sun painted the hospital room in soft golden light. Mrs. Brooks's face seemed to glow in the morning rays, and for a moment, Ethan was struck by how much Tyler resembled her. The same determined set to their jaw, the same gentle spirit in their features. He squeezed Tyler's shoulder again and said softly, "The same God who sent you to me won't abandon you now." Tyler looked up at him, hope flickering in his tired eyes. Outside the window, dawn had broken fully, marking the start of a new day and all its uncertainties. But in that moment, they both knew they wouldn't face them alone. The morning sun cast long shadows through the Hearts and Hands warehouse windows, but the usual bustle was missing. Ethan stood alone among the towering shelves of donations, checking his phone for the 100th time. No messages from Tyler. He rubbed his tired eyes and picked up another box of canned goods, his movements mechanical. The sound of his footsteps echoed in the empty space, where volunteers used to chat and laugh. 3 days had passed since Tyler disappeared into his mother's hospital room, and the silence in his absence felt deafening. Sarah, one of their regular volunteers, poked her head through the door. "Mr. Cole, Channel 5 is outside again. They're asking about the program's future." Ethan's shoulders tensed. "Tell them no comment for now, please." After she left, he slumped against a shelf, letting out a heavy breath. The local news had been circling like vultures since word got out about Tyler's absence. Their phones rang constantly with worried donors and partner organizations demanding answers. Back in his cramped office, really just a converted storage closet, Ethan faced a growing stack of paperwork. Purchase orders needed approval, donation receipts awaited processing, and 3 different churches had called about their weekly food distribution programs. He'd been handling it all alone, staying late into the night, trying to keep Tyler's dream alive. His own bills sat unopened in his desk drawer. The irony wasn't lost on him. Here he was, running a charity, while his own electricity warning notice glared at him from beneath a pile of forms. But he couldn't think about that now. Too many people were counting on them. The office phone rang again. Ethan recognized the number. It was their biggest corporate donor, Hearts and Hands. "This is Ethan Cole speaking." "Mr. Cole, this is Richard Martinez from Riverside Corp." The man's voice was crisp, businesslike. "We're concerned about recent developments, the media coverage about Miss Brooks' disappearance." "Tyler's dealing with a family emergency," Ethan interrupted, trying to keep his voice steady. "The program is continuing as normal. Nevertheless, our board requires assurance about the foundation's stability. Without Mr. Brooks' direct involvement." Ethan's free hand clenched into a fist. "Sir, every dollar you've donated has helped real families in real crisis. That hasn't changed. We'll need to review our commitment. You'll receive an email detailing our concerns." The line went dead before Ethan could respond. He set the phone down carefully, fighting the urge to throw it across the room. By afternoon, the whispers had grown louder. Ethan overheard 2 volunteers in the sorting area. "I heard the whole thing shutting down. Poor Tyler. First his mother, now this." He wanted to tell them they were wrong, that everything would be fine, but the words stuck in his throat. Instead, he grabbed his keys and jacket. There was work to be done. His first stop was First Baptist Church, their biggest local partner. Pastor Mike listened patiently as Ethan explained the situation, his kind eyes showing more concern for Ethan than the program. "Brother, you look exhausted," the pastor said gently. "I'm fine," Ethan insisted, straightening in his chair. "We just need to weather this storm. The families we help can't afford for us to fail." Next was the high school, where they ran a weekend backpack program for struggling students. Principal Roberts was sympathetic but direct. "We need to know there's a long-term plan, Ethan. These kids depend on those meals." By evening, Ethan had visited 6 more locations, repeating the same reassurances until his voice grew hoarse. His feet ached as he climbed the stairs to his apartment. Emma and Luke were at their aunt's house. He couldn't handle being both father and charity director right now. The empty apartment felt cold. He hadn't bothered turning on the heat. Another bill to avoid. Sinking onto the couch, he finally allowed himself to feel the weight of everything. The foundation that had saved his family was slipping away, and his friend, the boy who'd become like a son to him, was drowning in his own pain. His phone buzzed. Tyler's name appeared on the screen, sending Ethan's heart racing. Finally! But as he read the message, his hope crumbled. I can't do this anymore. I've failed everyone. The windshield wipers squeaked against the glass as Ethan navigated his old sedan through the dark Tennessee backroads. Rain pelted the roof in sheets, turning the asphalt into a glistening black mirror. His headlights cut through the downpour, illuminating the empty streets of their small town. Every few minutes, his phone buzzed with another concerned message from the Hearts and Hands team. But Ethan's mind was fixed on finding Tyler. The image of that lost, broken look in the boy's eyes at the hospital haunted him. As he drove, memories of his own darkest day flooded back the morning Tyler had found him collapsed at the bus stop. He remembered the shame burning in his chest as he lay there, too weak from hunger to stand. But instead of judgment, he'd found kindness in the eyes of a stranger, a teenager with a sandwich and a heart bigger than his years. "Lord," Ethan whispered, gripping the steering wheel tighter, "help me find him." He turned down another winding road, past shuttered storefronts and dark houses. The rain intensified, drumming against the car roof like countless tiny fists. Through the blur of his wipers, a familiar shape emerged, the old bus stop where everything had begun. And there, parked in the shadows, was Tyler's sleek black car. Ethan's heart clenched. He pulled over, killing his engine but leaving the headlights on. Through the rain-streaked windows, he could make out Tyler's silhouette in the driver's seat, head bowed over the steering wheel. Taking a deep breath, Ethan stepped out into the downpour. The cold rain soaked through his jacket immediately, but he barely noticed. He approached Tyler's car slowly, like someone approaching a wounded animal. He tapped gently on the passenger window. Tyler's head snapped up, eyes red-rimmed and startled. After a moment's hesitation, the door lock clicked. Ethan slid into the seat, bringing a rush of rain and cold air with him. The interior smelled of coffee and exhaustion. Fast food wrappers littered the floor, so unlike Tyler's usual tidiness. For a long moment, neither spoke. The rain drummed steadily on the roof, creating a cocoon of white noise around them. "How'd you find me?" Tyler's voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. "Just had a feeling," Ethan said softly. "This place. It means something to both of us." Tyler's hands tightened on the steering wheel until his knuckles went white. "I got the final numbers today. The foundation's broke. All our corporate sponsors pulled out, even my personal accounts." He swallowed hard. "I've got nothing left to give anymore." "Tyler, do you know what it's like?" Tyler's voice cracked. "To have everyone counting on you, believing in you, and then watching it all crumble? The doctors say Mom might never fully recover, the medical bills alone." He pressed the heels of his hands against his eyes. "I failed. Failed her. Failed the foundation. Failed everyone who trusted me." Ethan's heart ached. The boy before him seemed so young suddenly, not the confident entrepreneur who'd rescued him months ago, but a scared 17-year-old carrying the weight of the world. Without a word, Ethan stepped back out into the rain. He walked around to the driver's side and opened Tyler's door. "Come here, son." Tyler looked up at him, confused. "Just come here." Slowly, Tyler emerged from the car. The rain plastered his expensive shirt to his shoulders, but he didn't seem to notice. Ethan placed both hands on the boy's shoulders, forcing Tyler to meet his eyes. "You remember what you said to me that first day?" Ethan's voice was firm but gentle. "You said, 'Consider it a friend helping another.' You saw me at my lowest, hungry, hopeless, ashamed. But you didn't see a failure. You saw a human being who needed help." Tyler's chin trembled. "That was different." "No," Ethan said, "it wasn't." He knelt down on one knee in the wet pavement, rain streaming down his face. The position mirrored how Tyler had knelt beside him months ago when he'd fainted. "So now, I'm saying what you said to me. Let's start again, just like you helped me." The dam broke. Tyler's shoulders began to shake with silent sobs. Ethan stood and pulled him into a tight embrace, holding him as the rain poured down around them. "I'm scared," Tyler whispered against Ethan's shoulder. "I know, but you're not alone anymore." Ethan's voice was thick with emotion. "You gave me back my dignity, my hope, my future. Now, let me help carry your burden." They stood there in the rain, father and son in all but blood, while the storm raged around them. But in that embrace, a promise was reborn, not of wealth or success, but of something far more valuable: unconditional love and unshakable faith in each other. The same rain that had witnessed their first meeting now baptized their new beginning. And though the night was dark, dawn would come. It always did. The morning sun painted the hospital walls in soft golden hues as Ethan parked his car in the nearly empty lot. His hands trembled slightly as he checked his phone one last time. Dozens of message confirmations from families across town. Everything was set. He stepped out into the crisp morning air, his worn shoes crunching on the gravel. The parking lot wouldn't stay empty for long. Already, he could see a few familiar faces walking up from different directions, carrying handmade signs and battery-operated candles. Mrs. Rodriguez arrived first, her 3 children in tow. They carried a large banner that read, "You fed us when we were hungry." The paint was still fresh, and the letters had that endearing wobble of children's handwriting. Behind them came the Hendersons, then the Patels, and soon the trickle became a steady stream of people. Ethan's chest tightened with emotion as he watched them gather. These weren't just faces in a crowd, they were stories of hope, each one touched by Tyler's kindness. He recognized Jimmy Thompson, the mechanic who'd lost his shop before Hearts and Hands helped him restart. There was Sarah Chin, the single mother whose daughter now had a college scholarship thanks to Tyler's program. "Where should we stand?" whispered Mrs. Rodriguez, her eyes bright with purpose. Ethan gestured toward the grassy area beneath the 3rd-floor windows. "Right there, that's her room." He pointed to where Tyler's mother was staying, careful to keep his voice low. Tyler had been sleeping in a chair by her bed for days, barely leaving except for coffee runs. The crowd arranged themselves quietly, holding their signs high. Some brought flowers, others held small LED candles that glowed softly in the morning light. A local news van pulled up discreetly. Ethan had called them too, knowing Tyler needed to see the true impact of his work. At precisely 8 a.m., Mrs. Rodriguez's oldest daughter began to sing Amazing Grace. Other voices joined in, soft and reverent at first, then growing stronger. The sound drifted up through the morning air, reaching toward the hospital windows. Ethan watched as a figure appeared at the 3rd-floor window. Tyler's mother, awake and alert enough to sit up in her wheelchair. A nurse helped her closer to the glass. Even from below, they could see her eyes widen at the sight of the gathering. One by one, people stepped forward to share their stories. Jimmy Thompson went first, his voice rough with emotion. "My shop was going under. Bills piling up, couldn't even afford tools anymore. Then this kid, this amazing kid, shows up with not just money, but hope. He believed in me when nobody else would." Sarah Chin spoke next, her daughter clutching her hand. "Tyler didn't just help us with rent. He showed my Emily that dreams aren't just for rich people, that kindness matters more than money." More stories followed, each one a testament to lives changed. An elderly couple spoke about how Hearts and Hands volunteers had repaired their roof. A young father described how Tyler's program had helped him find work after prison. Through it all, Ethan kept his eyes on the 3rd-floor window. Tyler's mother was crying now, but smiling too. She pressed her hand against the glass as if trying to touch the love rising from below. Movement caught Ethan's attention. The hospital's front doors were opening. Tyler stepped out, looking dazed. His clothes were wrinkled from sleeping in the hospital chair, and dark circles rimmed his eyes. He froze at the top of the steps, taking in the scene before him. The singing stopped. Every face turned toward him. In that moment, he wasn't the teenage millionaire or the charitable foundation director. He was just a boy who needed to know he wasn't alone. Mrs. Rodriguez's youngest daughter broke from the crowd, running up the steps with a handful of wildflowers. "These are for your mama," she said, offering them to Tyler. Tyler knelt down to accept them, and that simple act seemed to break something open inside him. Tears spilled down his cheeks as he looked out at the sea of familiar faces. Faces of people he'd helped, people who had become family. His voice was barely above a whisper, but in the morning quiet, everyone heard him say, "You all saved me." The words hung in the air for a moment before the crowd surged forward, surrounding Tyler with gentle hugs and words of encouragement. Signs waved, candles flickered, and above it all, Tyler's mother watched from her window, beaming with pride. Ethan stood back, watching the scene unfold. He remembered that morning at the bus stop, when a stranger's kindness had saved him from despair. Now, the circle was complete. The helper had become the helped, and hope had found its way back home. Through the crowd, Tyler's eyes met Ethan's. No words were needed. They both understood that this was more than a rally. It was a reminder that no one has to carry their burdens alone. The freshly painted walls of the Hearts and Hands office gleamed in the morning light. Tyler adjusted his tie nervously in front of the glass doors, his reflection showing dark circles under his eyes from weeks of hospital visits. But there was something else there too, a renewed spark of determination. Ethan stood beside him, his weathered hand steady on Tyler's shoulder. "Ready?" he asked softly. Tyler nodded, taking a deep breath. "With you here? Always." They pushed through the doors together, greeted by the gentle hum of phones ringing and keyboards clicking. The office staff, a mix of both old and new faces, broke into spontaneous applause. Many had tears in their eyes, remembering the dark days when they thought everything was lost. Sarah, their operations manager, rushed forward with a stack of papers. "The lawyer finished the nonprofit paperwork this morning," she announced, her voice trembling with excitement. "We're officially national now." Tyler took the papers with shaking hands, but Ethan's calm presence steadied him. They made their way to the conference room, where board members from across the country waited on video screens. The morning light streamed through the windows, catching the dust motes in golden beams. "Ladies and gentlemen," Tyler began, his voice growing stronger with each word. "Welcome to the new chapter of Hearts and Hands. With your support, we're expanding our mission nationwide." Ethan watched proudly as Tyler outlined their vision: community centers in every state, job training programs, emergency assistance networks. The teenager who had once saved him at a bus stop had grown into a remarkable young man. Later that afternoon, news vans began arriving outside their building. Major networks wanted to cover their story of revival and redemption. Makeup artists fussed over both men as lights were set up and microphones checked. "Just be yourself," Tyler whispered to Ethan as the first interview began. "That's what people need to see." The reporter, a kind-faced woman named Patricia, leaned forward. "Mr. Cole, your story has captivated the nation. From losing everything to helping save hearts and hands, what kept you going?" Ethan's eyes softened as he remembered those desperate days. "Hope," he said simply. "Sometimes it's all we have left. And when someone believes in you, like Tyler believed in me, it can change everything." The interviews continued throughout the day. Each time Ethan spoke, his quiet dignity and genuine gratitude touched hearts. He never sought the spotlight, never claimed credit. Instead, he spoke about community, about lifting each other up, about second chances. By late afternoon, it was time for Ethan's first national television appearance. The studio lights felt hot and intimidating, but he focused on the message in his heart rather than the cameras. "I once stood at a bus stop," he began, his voice steady despite his nerves. "Too proud to admit I needed help, too broken to keep going. But grace found me there, in the form of a teenager with a sandwich and a heart full of compassion." The studio fell silent as he continued. "That's what Hearts and Hands is about, being that grace for others. We're not just providing jobs or food or training. We're providing dignity, hope, a chance to stand tall again." Viewers across the country watched as this humble man shared his story without pretense or polish. Social media exploded with responses. People shared their own stories of struggle and redemption. Donation pledges flooded in. "What's next for Hearts and Hands?" the host asked. Ethan smiled, glancing at Tyler, who stood just off camera. "We're going to keep showing up at bus stops," he said. "We're going to keep believing in people, because sometimes the smallest act of kindness can save someone's whole world." As the red recording light finally dimmed and the cameras powered down, Ethan stood quietly for a moment. The makeup artist offered to help remove his stage makeup, but he barely noticed her. His eyes lifted upward, past the studio lights, past the ceiling, to something far beyond. "Grace brought us here," he whispered, his voice thick with gratitude. In that moment, he wasn't thinking about national exposure or expanding programs. He was remembering a cold morning, an empty stomach, and a young man's extended hand that had changed everything. Sunlight danced across the lake's surface, creating sparkles that reminded Ethan of diamonds scattered on blue silk. The crisp autumn air carried the sweet scent of fallen leaves and the promise of winter. On a red and white checkered blanket spread across the grass, Ethan watched as Emma tugged on Tyler's sleeve, pulling him toward the open field with a bright yellow kite tucked under her arm. "Come on, Tyler, I'll show you how to make it dance in the sky." Emma's voice bubbled with excitement as she skipped ahead, her pigtails bouncing with each step. Luke sat cross-legged beside Ethan, munching on a peanut butter sandwich, his eyes following his sister and Tyler. "Dad, can I go help them too?" "Of course, buddy." Ethan ruffled his son's hair. "Just don't get tangled in the string." Luke scrambled to his feet, leaving half his sandwich behind as he raced to join them. Ethan leaned back on his elbows, taking in the scene before him. Tyler stood awkwardly holding the kite, while Emma demonstrated the proper technique with dramatic gestures. No, you have to hold it up higher." Emma's instructions carried across the field. "Like this." She stretched her arms up as far as they would go. Tyler's laughter echoed across the lake. "Like this?" He mimicked her pose, the kite wobbling in his hands. "Perfect, now run fast." Tyler took off running, the kite trailing behind him. Emma and Luke chased after him, their giggles mixing with the rustling leaves. After a few failed attempts and tangled string incidents, The yellow kite finally caught the wind and soared upward. "You did it!" Emma clapped her hands. "Now just hold on tight." The kite dipped and swooped against the blue sky, and Tyler's face lit up with childlike wonder. For a moment, Ethan saw not the successful businessman or the charitable founder, but simply a teenager experiencing pure joy. "This is amazing," Tyler called out, carefully maneuvering the kite string. "I've never flown a kite before." "Never?" Luke's eyes widened in disbelief. "Nope, my mom always worked so much we didn't have time for stuff like this." Emma moved closer to Tyler, her small hand finding his free one. "Well, you're part of our family now. We can fly kites every weekend." Tyler's eyes met Ethan's across the field, and something unspoken passed between them. Gratitude, understanding, belonging. Ethan nodded, a warm smile spreading across his face. Later, as they gathered back on the blanket for lunch, Tyler helped distribute sandwiches and juice boxes. The conversation flowed easily, punctuated by laughter and playful teasing. "So what's next for Hearts and Hands?" Ethan asked, watching Luke attempt to stick a straw into his juice box. Tyler's eyes lit up. "I've been thinking about starting a scholarship program for single parents. Help them get training, maybe even college degrees. What do you think?" "I think it's brilliant," Ethan replied, helping Luke with his juice. "Actually, I've been dreaming about opening a local training center, something hands-on, where people can learn practical skills." "Dad's really good at fixing things," Emma chimed in proudly. "He could teach everyone." Tyler nodded enthusiastically. "We could combine the ideas. The scholarship program could fund the training center students. It would be perfect." They spent the next hour brainstorming possibilities, the children adding their own creative suggestions. Emma thought they should have art classes, because everyone needs beauty, Daddy, while Luke insisted on a playground for when parents are studying. The afternoon sun began its descent, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. Emma and Luke had dozed off on the blanket, tired from their kite-flying adventures. Tyler and Ethan sat in comfortable silence, watching the sunset reflect off the lake. Ethan said softly, careful not to wake the children, "that day at the bus stop, when you found me, I thought I'd hit rock bottom. I was so ashamed, so broken." Tyler listened intently, his eyes fixed on the horizon. "But you gave me more than food that day," Ethan continued, his voice thick with emotion. "You gave me my life back. You showed me that sometimes help comes from the most unexpected places." "You don't owe me anything," Tyler replied gently. "Look at everything you've done since then. You saved the program when people doubted me. You've become like a father to me." He paused, looking at Emma and Luke's sleeping forms. "And they've become the siblings I never had." The sunset cast long shadows across the grass, as the day's last light painted everything in soft, golden hues. The lake water lapped gently at the shore, a peaceful rhythm that matched the quiet contentment in their hearts. Emma stirred slightly in her sleep, mumbling something about kites and angels. Tyler reached over and tucked the picnic blanket more securely around her shoulders. The gesture, so natural, it made Ethan's heart swell. "My family now," Tyler whispered, echoing Emma's earlier words. And Ethan knew that sometimes the best families aren't the ones we're born into, but the ones we build along the way. A gentle breeze rustled through the autumn leaves as Ethan Cole adjusted his tie in the mirror of a small-town community center bathroom. The reflection showed a different man than a year ago. His eyes were brighter, his shoulders straighter, and his smile came easily now. Gone were the hollow cheeks and the haunted look that had shadowed his face for so long. The worn suit that had hung loose on his frame had been replaced by a crisp navy blazer that fit him properly, though he'd kept his old watch as a reminder of harder times. The simple silver band caught the fluorescent light, its scratched surface telling the story of years spent working with his hands, providing for his family. 5 minutes till showtime, Tyler called from the doorway, tablet in hand and wearing his signature grin. At 17, he still had that boyish enthusiasm that had first drawn Ethan to him, but there was a new maturity in how he carried himself. His shoulders bore the weight of responsibility with grace, and his eyes held the wisdom that comes from learning that true wealth isn't measured in dollars. "Full house today. Looks like the whole town showed up. I counted at least 200 people out there." Ethan nodded, smoothing his collar one last time with fingers that no longer trembled from hunger or fear. The simple gesture had become a ritual, a moment of centering before stepping into the spotlight. "Remember when I could barely speak in front of 3 people? I used to get so nervous before job interviews that I'd break out in a cold sweat. Now look at you, national speaker for Hearts and Hands. Tyler grinned, stepping into the bathroom and leaning against the doorframe with casual confidence. Though you still fidget with your tie before every talk, some things never change. Some habits die hard, Ethan chuckled, following Tyler into the hallway. The sound of conversation hummed from the main hall, another packed audience waiting to hear their story. Men and women of all ages, some well-dressed, others showing the telltale signs of struggle that Ethan knew so well. Over the past year, they'd visited dozens of small towns across America, from Rust Belt cities to farming communities, spreading their message of hope and second chances. Each Hearts and Hands chapter they opened became a beacon of light for struggling families, a place where dignity was restored along with financial stability. The walls of the community center were lined with photos from previous events, smiling faces of families who'd found new jobs, children holding certificates from after-school programs, elderly folks at community dinners. Each image represented a life touched, a story rewritten. As they approached the stage entrance, Tyler squeezed Ethan's shoulder with the easy affection that had grown between them over the months. Their relationship had evolved from grateful recipient and generous benefactor to something deeper, a father-son bond that filled the empty spaces in both their hearts. Same routine? Same routine, Ethan confirmed, straightening his shoulders and taking a deep breath. You introduce the program, I'll share our story, and then we open it up for questions. The usual flow. The stage lights felt warm as they stepped out to enthusiastic applause. The crowd rose to their feet, a sea of faces both hopeful and hurting. Ethan scanned the audience while Tyler began his opening remarks about the foundation's mission, his voice carrying clearly through the sound system. Tyler had developed into a natural speaker, his passion infectious, and his message clear. He spoke about the ripple effects of kindness, about how one act of compassion could transform entire communities. Ethan's eyes caught on a man in the third row, thin, maybe early 30s, with hollow cheeks and shabby clothes that had seen better days. The man's jacket was clean but frayed at the edges, his shoes scuffed but polished. Ethan recognized the pride in those details, the effort to maintain dignity when everything else was falling apart. The man's gaze was fixed on his lap, shoulders hunched forward in that familiar pose of someone carrying too heavy a burden, someone who'd learned to make himself small in a world that seemed to have no place for him. Tyler's voice continued strong and clear, painting a picture of the work they'd accomplished together. In just 12 months, we've opened 43 Hearts and Hands chapters across 14 states. We've helped over 800 families find stable employment, provided emergency assistance to thousands more, and created sustainable support networks that continue to grow. But behind every number is a story, a face, a family whose world changed because someone cared enough to stop and help. The audience listened intently, some taking notes, others simply absorbing the hope in Tyler's words. Parents held their children closer, perhaps imagining what it would be like to struggle as Ethan had, or remembering times when they themselves had walked that difficult path. And now, Tyler said, his voice warming with genuine affection, I'd like to introduce someone very special, the man who taught me that sometimes the helper needs helping too. He showed me that true strength isn't about having all the answers, but about being willing to admit when you need a hand up. Please welcome Ethan Cole, our National Director of Community Outreach. More applause filled the hall as Ethan stepped to the microphone, the familiar surge of nervous energy coursing through him. Public speaking had never come naturally, but he'd learned that authenticity mattered more than polish. The crowd quieted, sensing the gravity of the moment. He couldn't stop glancing at the man in the third row, seeing echoes of himself from that morning at the bus stop, the same defeated posture, the same careful distance from hope. A year ago, Ethan began, his voice steady and warm despite the emotion threatening to break through. I was a broken man pretending to be whole. My cupboards were empty, my hope was gone, and my children were watching me fade away one missed meal at a time. He paused, letting the weight of those words settle over the crowd. The man in the third row lifted his head slightly, as if recognizing his own story in Ethan's words. I was standing at a bus stop in the cold, dizzy from hunger, about to give up on everything that mattered to me. Then God sent me an angel in sneakers, though he prefers to be called Tyler. Gentle laughter rippled through the crowd, breaking some of the tension without diminishing the impact of his words. Ethan continued, weaving their story of friendship, faith, and resurrection from despair. He spoke about the sandwich that had saved his life, about Tyler's stubborn kindness that refused to take no for an answer. He described the slow rebuilding of trust in others, in himself, in the possibility that tomorrow could be better than today. But the real miracle wasn't the food or even the job, Ethan said, his eyes finding the struggling man again. The man was fully engaged now, leaning forward slightly, his weathered hands clasped tightly in his lap. It was the return of dignity. Tyler saw me, really saw me, when I felt invisible to the world. He reminded me that my worth wasn't measured by my bank account or my failures, but by the love I had to give and the strength I carried inside, even when I couldn't feel it myself. He talked about the ripple effects that followed, how accepting help had allowed him to help others, how vulnerability had become his greatest strength. The audience hung on every word, many nodding in recognition or wiping away quiet tears. As they moved into the Q&A portion, Ethan watched the man in the third row raise his hand tentatively, then lower it quickly before being called on. The gesture was heartbreakingly familiar, the desire to reach out warring with the fear of being seen as weak, of admitting defeat. When the session ended and people began filing out, stopping to chat and exchange contact information, Ethan noticed him lingering near his seat, staring at the floor as others passed by. He moved with the careful slowness of someone conserving energy, someone who hadn't eaten a full meal in too long. "Tyler," Ethan whispered, touching the young man's arm as they stood together on the stage. "Can you handle the meet and greet line for a few minutes? I think there's someone who needs to talk." Tyler followed his gaze and nodded with immediate understanding. Over the months, they'd developed an intuitive partnership, each recognizing when the other spotted someone in particular need. "Go. Do what you do best." Ethan made his way through the crowd, stopping to shake hands and exchange quick words with attendees. A grandmother thanked him for helping her daughter find work after a messy divorce. A young father shared that his family had started their own small food pantry after hearing their story 6 months ago. Each conversation was meaningful, but Ethan kept the struggling man in his peripheral vision, noting how he remained apart from the groups forming around the room. As the hall emptied and the last of the volunteers finished stacking chairs, the man still sat in his spot, now completely alone except for the custodial staff beginning their evening cleanup. Ethan approached quietly, his footsteps soft on the worn carpet, not wanting to startle him or make him feel cornered. "Sometimes," Ethan said softly, settling into the chair beside him rather than looming above, "the hardest step is asking for help." The man looked up, startled by the gentle voice beside him. Up close, Ethan could see more details that painted a clearer picture. The dark circles under his eyes spoke of sleepless nights, spent worrying. The slight tremor in his hand suggested someone running on empty for too long, and the careful way he held himself indicated pride that hadn't quite been broken yet. All too familiar signs of someone fighting a losing battle, but still fighting nonetheless. "I'm fine," the man said automatically, the response so quick it was clearly rehearsed. Then he gave a bitter laugh that held no humor, just exhaustion. "That's what I keep telling my kids anyway. They're too young to understand why Daddy can't buy groceries anymore, why we had to move in with Grandma, why I stare at job applications until my eyes burn." The raw honesty in those words hit Ethan like a physical blow. He remembered those conversations with his own children, the careful explanations that tried to maintain their sense of security, while his world crumbled around them. Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet, fingers finding the worn napkin he'd carried for a year, the one Tyler had written his number on during that first encounter. He'd kept it as a talisman, a reminder of how quickly everything could change when the right person appeared at the right moment. Now, he took out a fresh business card and began writing on the back with a pen borrowed from his jacket pocket. The man watched with a mixture of curiosity and wariness, uncertainty and pride warring on his weathered face. His eyes tracked every movement of Ethan's pen, hope, and fear dancing together in his expression. "I didn't come here for charity," he said quietly, the words carrying the weight of a man who'd been forced to swallow his pride too many times already. I heard you speak at the diner where I work part-time. Thought maybe. I don't know what I thought." "I know," Ethan interrupted gently, his voice carrying the weight of understanding earned through experience. "Neither did I, that day at the bus stop. I was just trying to get to a job interview that I was sure wouldn't matter anyway. But sometimes God puts the right person in our path at the right moment, whether we're looking for them or not." He folded the card carefully and held it out, watching as the man stared at it without taking it. On the back, he'd written 3 simple words that had become his personal motto: "Hope never faints." "This is my direct number," Ethan said, his voice warm but not pushy. "And Tyler's too. We can't fix everything overnight, but we can start with tomorrow. Sometimes that's enough." The man's hand shook slightly as he finally reached for the card, his fingers brushing Ethan's for just a moment. In that brief contact, Ethan felt the transfer of something more than paper. It was the passing of hope from one struggling soul to another, the continuation of a cycle that had started with a teenager sandwich and a stranger's kindness. "My name's David," the man said quietly, finally meeting Ethan's eyes. "David Martinez. I used to manage a warehouse before the company moved operations overseas. Now I wash dishes 3 nights a week and tell my 8-year-old daughter that tomorrow will be better." "Well, David Martinez," Ethan said, standing and extending his hand with a smile that reached his eyes, "tomorrow just got a little brighter, and I have a feeling your daughter's going to be very proud of her daddy for taking this step." As they shook hands in the nearly empty community center, with Tyler gathering their materials nearby and the last of the evening light filtering through the windows, Ethan felt the familiar warmth of purpose flowing through him. The circle was completing itself once again, as it had dozens of times over the past year, as it would continue to do for years to come. Hope, he'd learned, was the most renewable resource in the world. The morning frost painted delicate crystalline patterns across the weathered wooden slats of the bus stop bench, each intricate design catching the pale light of dawn like nature's own artwork. This was the same bench where Ethan Cole's life had shattered and then been miraculously rebuilt exactly 1 year ago. Now, in the gentle warmth of his reliable Honda Civic, a far cry from the broken-down truck he'd once owned, he sat contentedly beside Tyler Brooks, sharing steaming coffee from matching travel mugs emblazoned with the Hearts and Hands logo. The familiar ritual had become sacred to them both. Every morning before the sun fully rose, they would drive the local routes, checking bus stops and street corners where the forgotten and desperate might find themselves at their breaking point. It was their quiet ministry, their way of staying connected to the pain they had once known so intimately. "Remember that day?" Tyler asked softly, his warm breath fogging the passenger window as he gazed out at the bench that had changed everything. His voice carried the weight of shared memory, tinged with gratitude and wonder. "Right here, on this exact spot." Ethan nodded slowly, his callous fingers wrapping around the ceramic mug, savoring both its warmth and the bitter sweetness of the coffee. Tyler had insisted on buying the expensive kind that Ethan had never been able to afford in his darkest days. "How could I forget? I was so hungry I could barely think straight, let alone stand up without the world spinning around me." In the back seat, Emma and Luke dozed peacefully against each other, their small bodies bundled in thick winter coats that actually fit them properly now. Pink-cheeked and well-fed, they looked like different children than the ones who had once worn threadbare clothing and worried expressions far too mature for their ages. They had insisted on joining their father and Tyler for what the family had lovingly dubbed their kindness patrol, a term Emma had coined with the innocent wisdom that seemed to flow from her naturally. Through the frost-etched windshield, they watched as a solitary figure approached the bus stop through the gray morning light. The man's coat was thin and inadequate against the bitter Tennessee winter, his shoulders hunched protectively against the biting wind that cut through the fabric like it wasn't even there. He moved with the careful, measured steps of someone conserving every ounce of strength, as if each footfall required a conscious decision and tremendous effort. "Dad," Emma whispered suddenly, her voice cutting through the peaceful silence as she stirred from her light sleep. Her blue eyes, so much like her mother's, were wide with recognition and compassion. "He looks just like you did, in those pictures." Ethan's heart clenched painfully in his chest. The pictures she referred to were newspaper clippings from their story that had gone viral, black and white images that captured his darkest moments with unflinching clarity. Photos of a broken man with hollow cheeks and desperate eyes, a father who had sacrificed everything for his children and found himself with nothing left to give. The stranger at the bench swayed dangerously, his hand reaching out to steady himself against the cold metal armrest. "Tyler," Ethan said sharply, his voice cutting through the morning stillness with urgent alarm. "I see it." Tyler was already throwing open his door, moving with the quick reflexes of someone who had learned to recognize the signs of human crisis. The cold air rushed into the car, carrying with it the sharp bite of winter and the weight of impending catastrophe. The man's knees buckled without warning. He reached desperately for the bench's support, but his trembling fingers missed their target, sending him crumpling to the frozen ground in exactly the same helpless way Ethan had collapsed on that life-changing morning. They were out of the car and running before conscious thought could catch up with instinct. Tyler reached the fallen man first, his sneakers crunching loudly on the frost-covered grass that sparkled like broken glass in the early light. Ethan was right behind him, already shrugging off his warm winter coat, the first truly good coat he'd owned in years, without a second thought. Sir, can you hear me?" Tyler's voice was steady and reassuring, carrying the same calm authority and genuine concern he'd used with Ethan in this very spot. His training as a young CEO had taught him to manage crises, but his heart had taught him to manage human suffering. The man's eyes fluttered open slowly, confusion and deep shame flooding his weathered features like a tide of pain. His lips were chapped and pale, his skin carrying the grayish pallor of prolonged hunger and stress. "I'm sorry," he mumbled through chattering teeth, his voice barely above a whisper. "Just got dizzy for a moment. I'm fine, really." Ethan draped his thick coat gently over the man's shoulders, while Tyler helped him into a sitting position on the bench. Up close, the similarities were haunting and heartbreaking. The sharp cheekbones that spoke of too many missed meals, the proud but thoroughly broken spirit that still flickered behind tired eyes, the way his hands trembled with weakness and cold, and the weight of carrying burdens too heavy for any one person to bear. "When's the last time you had something to eat?" Ethan asked with the gentle directness of someone who understood that pride could be both a strength and a deadly enemy. The man's silence stretched between them, heavy with shame and defeat. His inability to answer was more eloquent than any words could have been, telling a story they all recognized with painful clarity. Emma appeared beside them like a small angel of mercy, holding the brown paper bag they always kept ready in the car, their emergency kit of hope. Inside were carefully wrapped sandwiches made with real meat and cheese, fresh fruit that wasn't bruised or discounted, and bottles of clean water. Luke trailed behind his sister with the careful solemnity of a child who had learned that hungry people needed more than food. They needed dignity and kindness served alongside their meal. "Here," Emma said softly, offering the bag with the same quiet grace and natural compassion her father had spent months teaching her. Her small hands were steady, her blue eyes filled with the kind of understanding that shouldn't exist in someone so young. "Please take it. You don't have to be hungry anymore." The man's eyes filled with tears that he tried desperately to blink away, his throat working silently as emotion overwhelmed him. "I can't take your food. I don't have any money to pay you back." "You can," Tyler interrupted with gentle firmness, kneeling down so he could look the man directly in the eyes. "We've been exactly where you are. We know what it feels like to have the world disappear from under your feet." Ethan settled beside the bench, his knees finding the same cold concrete where he had once knelt in his own moment of absolute desperation. "You're not alone anymore," he said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had walked through the valley of shadows and emerged into light. "That's a promise." The man's hands shook violently as he accepted the bag, his fingers fumbling with the simple paper, as if it contained the most precious treasure in the world. "I have kids," he whispered, his voice breaking on the words. "At home, waiting for me. I've been trying to find work, trying to make something happen, but everything just keeps falling apart." "What's your name?" Ethan asked, recognizing the need to restore the man's sense of identity and worth. Michael Davidson." The name came out like a confession, as if he wasn't sure he deserved to claim it anymore. "Well, Michael," Tyler said warmly, pulling out his phone with practiced efficiency, "how would you feel about coming to work with us at Hearts and Hands? We're always looking for people who understand what it means to keep fighting when the whole world feels dark and impossible." Michael looked between them with growing amazement, recognition slowly dawning in his tired eyes like the sun breaking through storm clouds. You're them. From the news stories, the man and the teenager, the story about a hungry man at a bus stop." Ethan finished with a gentle smile that transformed his entire face. "And a teenager who stopped to help when he could have just kept walking. About how one simple act of kindness can change everything and create ripples that spread farther than we ever imagined." Emma reached out and touched Michael's arm with the fearless compassion of innocence. "Daddy says everyone deserves a second chance to make their dreams come true, or a third, or a fourth, or however many it takes," Luke added with the serious wisdom of a child who had learned that hope was not a luxury but a necessity. Michael took a shaky bite of the sandwich, his face transforming as real food filled his empty stomach and color slowly returned to his pale cheeks. Tyler was already on his phone, calling the Hearts and Hands emergency assistance line, arranging for immediate help for Michael's family groceries, utility assistance, and the kind of comprehensive support that addressed not just the crisis, but the underlying causes. Ethan sat beside Michael on the bench, sharing quiet words of encouragement and understanding, speaking the language of one survivor to another. He talked about the shame that felt like drowning, about the way hunger could make you feel invisible and worthless, about how accepting help wasn't weakness, but wisdom. The sky began to lighten gradually, painting the entire scene in soft pinks and golds that made everything look touched by grace. Other early morning commuters passed by on their way to jobs and responsibilities. Some nodding in recognition at Ethan and Tyler. Their story had made them local celebrities of sorts, while others simply smiled at the small group gathered around the bench, sensing something beautiful happening, even if they didn't understand the details. When Michael had finished eating and his strength had visibly returned, Tyler offered him a ride home in the kind of voice that made it clear this wasn't charity but fellowship. "We'll stop and pick up some groceries for your family on the way," he said matter-of-factly. "And tomorrow morning, if you're ready, you can start fresh with us. We'll begin with some basic training and see where your talents can best serve our mission." "I don't know how to thank you." Michael's voice cracked with emotion as he struggled to find words adequate to the miracle he was experiencing. "This morning I thought it might be the end of everything." Ethan helped him stand, steadying him with the same firm, confident grip that Tyler had offered him not so very long ago. The circle was completing itself with mathematical precision, each act of kindness generating the next in an endless chain of grace. Emma and Luke gathered the empty wrappers and napkins with practiced efficiency, working together with the teamwork they had learned during countless morning missions of mercy. Standing there in the growing light of dawn, Ethan pulled his children close, feeling their hearts beating with shared purpose and joy against his chest. The weight of their small bodies against him was a constant reminder of what he had almost lost and what he had been given back. "No act of kindness is ever wasted," he said, watching as Tyler helped Michael into the car with careful attention to his dignity. "Every single one creates ripples that spread outward, touching more lives than we can ever imagine or count." The morning sun crested the horizon fully now, its golden rays catching and illuminating the Hearts and Hands logo painted on their car door, a simple but powerful image of two hands clasped together, forming the shape of a heart. It symbolized the endless cycle of compassion that had brought them all to this moment, to this second chance, to this new beginning that felt as fresh and full of possibility as the morning itself. As they prepared to drive Michael home to his waiting family, Ethan felt the deep satisfaction that came from knowing that the circle of grace would continue, expanding outward like ripples on a pond, touching lives they would never even know about. This was what redemption looked like in the real world, not grand gestures or dramatic moments, but ordinary people choosing to see each other's pain and respond with love. What would you do if you were in their place? Comment your answer below and let's see how you'd rewrite the ending. If you enjoyed the story of Ethan Cole, I handpicked the next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.